was wrong to say I wouldn't change a thing, 'cause in the story of our lives, the best of times through color glass, time rolls on enough to let me move on past, but every little now and then it creeps on back to shade my smile.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever the case may be. For all of you listening out there across the crazy planet Earth, welcome to Vestiges After Dark. And I am your host, Bishop Brian Willett, coming to you live from the deep woods of Western Georgia on this February 28th, 2023. Tonight we're talking about mediumship, and we have a brand new guest, Natasha Venter, here. She'll be coming on at the top of the next hour to talk about many misconceptions that might exist, or many that you might even have yourself, about mediumship. We're going to get to the bottom of its reality and maybe see some of the intricate truths that it has to teach us. It's going to be a very interesting, enlightening show, as it always is, and I'm looking forward to spending it with all of you. Don't go away. Everybody, welcome to a brand new edition of Vestiges After Dark. I'm so happy that you're here to join us for this 3 hours this evening as we get into episode 2 of the new season 7. I'm very much looking forward to this. Actually, I think it's going to be a good show, and I always love bringing on a new guest. That's always a lot of fun to talk to somebody that we have not talked to before. And oftentimes, in fact, almost every time, they become a returning guests because we love them so much. So it's going to be a lot of fun tonight. I hope that you are ready for some interesting conversation. But to get started here, we have Jamie Wolf with our liturgical libations. And today we have Auchentoshan.
21 year Lowland Scotch.
21 year. This was actually a gift from Jamie for Christmas to Tracy and myself. So let's see what it's all about.
Cheers.
Right? It's a Lowland Scotch. It's very
better every time I taste it.
It's fruity.
It is fruity tonight.
Because you're not drinking it after rye.
Right. I've expanded my palate, everybody.
Last time she had
I'm a rye girl. I'm a bourbon girl, but I'm trying to ease into the Scotch.
Last time she tried this one, the Auchentoshan. I can never say this one. Auchentoshan, 21-year-old. Last time she tried it, she had just finished the rye that I got her for Christmas. And so it was
ruined my palate.
It wasn't.
It ruined.
Yeah, it wasn't meant to, I think, blend terribly well. Those two things are kind of different flavors. The Auchentoshan's very fruity, and the rye's very spicy. And so, yeah. Now, there you go. So that's what we're drinking tonight. It's actually very, very good. And thank you so much for pouring that for me.
No problem.
We're going to get started here, jump right into the first segment. First of all, I want to say Father Chris will not be with us this evening. He has a funeral that he has to offer. So he will be presiding at that funeral. He cannot be with us this evening. But in lieu of that, we have Brandon Milam with us. How are you doing tonight, Brandon?
Doing pretty good, despite having to fight a cough that I've had for like 2 weeks now.
Well, join the club, right?
Well,
it seems like everybody's got a cough right now.
We got pollen invading down here already, so I'm hitting the Zyrtec first thing in the morning.
Yeah, Ricola. Yeah, that stuff. That my wife loves that stuff. She can't get enough of it. When she gets a cold, or something that causes a cough, she will keep it for like 6 months. No lie, it just keeps going and going. It never goes away. Well, it does, but it takes a long time to go away. You even forget, like, what was the illness that caused this cough? I mean, I don't even remember anymore because it takes that long for her to get rid of it. It really is crazy. I'm fortunate. I don't really have that kind of effect. I'll get a cough, but usually it only lasts for a few days.
Bone broth and
yeah.
chicken pho.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's
Pho is the
my remedy
secret
for
weapon.
everything.
Vitamin
Arm
D.
ripped off, have some chicken pho. You'll be fine.
Vitamin D, vitamin
Yes.
C,
Zinc.
Zyrtec for the allergies, and zinc. And if you do get sick, or if you feel something coming on, neem leaf tea,
Yes.
fantastic stuff. That stuff is the best antiviral I have ever encountered in my life. It's how I got through 3 bouts of COVID and really didn't have any problems. I mean, most of the time it was just basically like a head cold.
Nature will give you what you need.
If you use everything that we need is there. We just need to actually cultivate and harness that wisdom, I think. But anyway, before we get started, Brandon, there is a question from the ether that I need to introduce because it is something that comes up too frequently. It's something that I think we need to address so that people understand. Because I think it's been going on for so long now that people might not remember why we even started doing it. So I want to just mention this real quick. This was a question that came in on Facebook. I think it was on the Holy Nicolaitan Catholic Church page. So it was on the page for the church. And it was an individual that asked, because she was watching our live feed for our Mass. And as you all know, if you're on YouTube, you probably know, if you're a subscriber, hopefully you subscribed, like our video, subscribe, please. It helps the channel and it helps the church. If you can't afford to donate to the church, this is another way that you can help the church without having it cost you any money. Just basically like the church. I mean, like all the videos the church puts out there, and be sure to also subscribe to the channel. In fact, we hit our 1,000 subscriber mark. In fact, we're well over it now. And that's fantastic, because what that does is now we're a YouTube partner. Now, I'm still not going to monetize the videos yet, because I don't feel like we're still quite at that point where our videos are prolific enough. If it matches what we get with the on-demand podcast, that would be great. But, remember, the podcast has been around a lot longer than the YouTube videos. I only started doing the YouTube videos because people were like, why can't we see you guys? Why does it have to be an audio only podcast? Well, it's like, okay, I can simulcast a feed to video and also do,
Now you get to look at our mugs.
You get to look at us while we are doing the show, but it's still a podcast that still goes out to all of the podcasts as an audio only version. And there's even a live version on Spreaker for people that don't want to use YouTube. But if you have YouTube, you should. You can watch us, okay? But if you're on the channel, then you already know that we also live stream the Mass. And this started during the COVID lockdowns, okay? Because during that time, people were locked out of their churches, and they knew that I offer the Mass. It's one of my obligations as a bishop. So they asked me, could you stream your Mass for us? I have a private chapel in my home. And that's where I offer the Mass, because I don't run a traditional pastoral ministry. I don't run a diocese. The teaching ministry and the exorcism ministry is exclusively what I do. Okay. So I don't have the regular pastoral responsibilities that most bishops do. But I still have the obligation to offer the Mass. So I said, okay, yeah, I don't have any problem setting up my iPhone for you guys. I'll do that. And it became a big thing. In fact, we started to develop a congregation from all over the world. And when the lockdowns ended and life slowly started to return to normal, although I don't think we're quite even there yet, we're still normal enough that at this point people can go back to church. There's a bunch of people that said, can we still have the Mass? Can you keep it going? So I said, well, I've been doing it all this time anyway. Why not? So I did. And that's what I've been doing. So we simulcast the Mass, usually once a week, but if there's like a solemnity or something, we'll do more than that. And we do that, at least once a week for the primary Mass. For Sunday, we usually do a Saturday night vigil. And it's from my private chapel at my home. And inevitably, we get people that ask, is do you have a congregation? Where's your congregation? Why can't we see your congregation? And it's like, no, the congregation's all of you guys all over
everywhere.
the world. You're all over the world. Even if I had a public location for you to come to, most of you wouldn't be able to come to it anyway. And there's really not much of a demand here. We're going to set up a public location, but it's not to start a pastoral ministry. It's to have a headquarters for bringing clients.
It's going to be small and modest and functional.
And functional, yeah. But nice. It needs to be nice. It won't be like the mission church. It won't be like that. But anyway, the reality is this is my private home. So no, it's not open to the public. No, we're not having parishioners come here. And that's why you don't see parishioners on the mass feed, because that's my private chapel. And the only people that attend that mass are my wife, my son, and my number one colleague and best friend. So, I mean, here she is. And you know her from...
security in general, pain in the ass.
Well, we're both pains in the ass. So I think
it's a cancer thing.
Cancels each other out. But so if you're wondering why, it's like, why is this priest offering mass and there's nobody there except for these few people? This is why. It's my private mass, okay? And it's kind of like a monastic mass. If you've ever been to... Well, you probably haven't, because most people have never been to a monastery and seen the priests there offer their private masses. At the Carthusian monastery, they have their own little private chapels where they offer mass alone. It's a wonderfully beautiful way to have an intimate moment with God, because the mass is typically a social experience. It's a social prayer, but this is a way of making it a little bit more contemplative. And this is what we do in the Nicolaitan Church. And so I'm sharing that with all of you. So if you ever have that question, like, where's the congregation now? You know why there isn't one, because we're not building a pastoral ministry here. There's not really a need for one here in Atlanta, Georgia. Maybe if we were in other places around the world, that would be a different story. But here in Atlanta, Georgia, people tend to be pretty happy with their conventional churches, and they're not really interested in our more esoteric one. Let's leave it at that. But there's definitely a strong demand for exorcists here, and there's nobody doing that work. It's all on my shoulders, let me tell you. So we do serve a purpose here, okay? But I figured, hey, I'm doing the mass anyway. I have to do the mass anyway. Why not share it with all of you? And that's what we do. And that's why we stream it live publicly for all of you to maybe get some spiritual enrichment out of that. And you can listen to me give your, if you're not into all of the ritual, at least you get to hear me talk once a week. Okay. I know there's I say that sarcastically because there's a whole bunch of people that only tune in to hear me talk. And it's like, no, it's not, I'm not the focus here. God's the focus, but it's the way it is. Anyway, that answers the question. So Brandon, what do you have for us tonight from the ether?
So we got a couple really, really good questions. Starting off, Jackie from our network.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
This question is probably one of the very best ones I've seen, because I've had this question for many years, and I think many other Christians have had this question as well.
Right.
But she had asked, do I need to be baptized as an adult, especially now after learning all these new things about religion and rededicating my life?
Okay, that is a big question that gets sort of distorted out there due to the various denominations of Protestantism. That's really sort of made it a convoluted mess. Theologically speaking, okay, and this was established in 325, okay, at the Council of Nicaea, okay, one of the primary ones that sort of established what would be Christian theology for the next 2,000 years. The Council of Nicaea, okay, the biggest one, honestly, the most important one. And out of that, we got the Nicene Creed, which is something that is recited by both Catholics and Orthodox and even a few Protestants at every service. That's how important it is, because what the Nicene Creed does is it outlines very specifically the basic tenets of the Christian faith. So my opinion is, if you do not believe in anything, if there's something in the Nicene Creed that you have a problem with, then you really have a problem with being a Christian, because to be a Christian, you have to affirm what's in the Nicene Creed, because that's what's established to be what Christianity is. If you don't agree with the Nicene Creed, then you're actually something else. And that's okay. If you want to be something else, that's okay. I'm not criticizing you for that, but let's be clear as to what the Christian faith is. The Nicene Creed establishes that. Okay, so in the Nicene Creed, it says, I profess one baptism for the forgiveness of sins. And the reason for that is that Christ died once on the cross. He didn't need to die multiple times. He didn't need to keep coming back to die. He wasn't a repetitive sacrifice like the animal sacrifices of the Jewish people. Jesus was the sacrifice to end all sacrifices. Therefore, his one death is the only one that's necessary. It completes the entirety of salvation, the story of salvation, and baptism is our dying with him. So if he died once, we only die once with him. And then we rise once, and that's the resurrection and eternal life, entering into the beatific vision to exist for all eternity in the kingdom of heaven. That is that's the goal, I guess you could say, of every Christian. So one baptism for the forgiveness of sins, which means that there is only ever one necessary, and any one that you would try to do after that is not only superfluous, but it's actually counter to the theology. It shows that you do not understand the theology. It shows that you do not understand the Christian faith, and that's problematic because you really should know better. Okay, and they're not teaching it. I'm not blaming people that think this way. I'm blaming the pastors who aren't teaching correctly. And so these people that say, oh, you were baptized as a baby? Well, that's not valid. You need to get baptized again.
Oh, Lord.
And that's the reason. Because what happens is you have Catholics that baptize their kids, but they don't raise their kids in the Catholic faith. And then they go and they grow up and they do their own thing, and then they fall into some evangelical or non-denominational Christian church, and then they're like, well, are you baptized? And they're like, well, I was baptized as a baby. Oh, that doesn't count because you didn't know better, and you need to be able to make a personal decision as an adult for baptism to work. No, that's not it at all. The power of the sacrament is in the saving action of Christ on the cross. It doesn't matter if the person's fully aware of it or not. It is the power of the sacrament itself that matters. And so, no, you never need to be baptized again. In fact, I always say to people, the best thing you could possibly do is baptize your kid within, the first month or two of them being born, because that at least gives them the graces to work with. And I've had people object to that and say, oh, but I don't want to determine my child's spirituality. I don't want to force them. It's like, how are you forcing them to do anything? You're giving them the grace to work with so that if they do choose the Christian faith when they grow up, they don't have to go and backtrack. They already have what they need to get started in it. You're not forcing them. And just because they get baptized doesn't mean they need to stay Christian. If they choose to go on and do something else, well, then they choose to go on and do something else, and that's fine. But at least they had the grace to work with. And if they don't use it, well, the grace stays dormant until they do use it. But that's the best time to do it. And that's the best way to do it. And that's what the whole point of godparents is. This is what really angers me about the whole way that we do godparents today. Because godparents is like an honor. Oh, I'm going to honor this person. Say, I want you to be my son's godparent. And it's like, that's not what being a godparent's about. Yeah. Being a godparent means that you're willing to take on the spiritual responsibility to see to it that that child is raised in the Christian faith, and that you're going to make sure that that happens, and also that you're going to affirm, because the child is not knowledgeable yet of the tenets of Christianity, that you're going to affirm on their behalf that you are recognizing their faith, and that you will see to it that they at least are exposed to the faith. And then when they become an adult, they can make an informed decision. Okay, so that's the long way of saying, no, you never need to be baptized again. The only exception to this rule is if you were baptized illicitly, which can sometimes happen because there's these weird churches today that will say, they call it baptism, but they're like, when you do the ritual, they're not even using water. They're saying, I baptize you in the name of the Creator and his offspring and the Spirit that binds us all. That's not a valid baptism. Okay, it needs to be, I baptize you with water. I baptize you in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. That's the Trinitarian formula. Any baptism that does not include that formula is not considered to be a valid baptism. And therefore, it kind of, then you would need to have a conditional baptism or some kind of, have it done not necessarily again because it wasn't really done the first time. They just called it baptism, but it wasn't really baptism. Okay. So I hope that answers the person's question.
I think it did, and especially it answered the question for me, because I've had it for years.
Well, you probably have encountered that because you grew up, what, Southern Baptist, or you were exposed Southern Baptist? Yeah.
Yep.
So they don't baptize children.
I want to say I might have been between 8 to 10.
Oh, but yeah, well I mean, they don't
baptized.
baptize babies is what I meant to say.
Oh, yeah, no.
Yeah.
No, they don't.
Yeah. So they would probably, there would probably be churches in the Southern Baptist Church that say, oh, you were baptized as a baby? That doesn't count because you didn't know better. And that's not how it works. That's not how it works. No, the Catholic and Orthodox churches, which are the oldest, and you have baptism today because of them, they made it very clear in the first century. You can even see it in the Didache. Okay, it's implied in certain places. It's also implied. There's even places in Scripture where it's like whole families were baptized that day. It would say, and we need to understand that that's very significant because the Jewish people in the ancient world were like rabbits. Okay, they had more children than they knew what to do with. So you could never say they baptized an entire family if there weren't a lot of children involved in that family. So that's how we know that that it goes back that far. But it was part of the holy tradition since anyway. So it was always an established part of the faith.
All right, so we have a second question, which is another question I don't know why I didn't think of sooner, but it comes from Marina, also from the network.
Okay.
And she had posted a lengthy question, but I've been able to break it down into what happens to those who died and did not have the opportunity to learn about Jesus or the gospel.
Okay, so that getting into like the whole thing that there's no salvation outside the Catholic faith. That was a long-standing tenet that exists, and to a certain extent, it still is a tenet of it, but it's been interpreted differently today than it used to be. There was a time, unfortunately, in the Christian faith, particularly when Catholicism was the law of the land, that used to state that if you were not part of the Catholic faith, then you basically were damned. Now, the Catechism of the Catholic Church today does not say that. In fact, it says quite the opposite today.
Respect.
Now it has a much more logical position that states that while there are more perfect ways to approach one's relationship with God, all religions have an essence of that relationship, reflect that relationship in varying degrees. Now, of course, they're never going to say that, it doesn't matter. We do. We say that in the Nicolaitan Church, but the Church of Rome is not going to say that. They're going to say that,
That's why the Church of Rome doesn't like us.
Well, that's why they hate us, yeah. Because, we kind of go outside the paradigm, and I'm all about destroying paradigms. So here we are. We're destroying them tonight. But that's the reality, is that they would hold that unless you were Catholic. They don't say that today. So I'm going to basically answer it by what the Church of Rome teaches and how we even expand on that here in the Nicolaitan Church. So the Church of Rome teaches that that Christ can reach you where you're at. Okay, so you might be a devout Buddhist or a devout Hindu or even a devout Wiccan or something. Okay, something that seems contrary to the Christian faith. But there is something within, although I would say it's not contrary, by the way. I just want to make that clear. But the church would say there is something within every spiritual practice that is a reflection of Christ, and that every single religion has a connection to that principle. They might not call it Christ. They might not understand it to even be Christ. But yet it is Christ indwelling within that system. And so therefore, a person that has not had any exposure to the gospel or did not die be a Christian would still, as long as they applied some level of spiritual conviction, would be able to call upon that in order to enter into a deeper state of awareness with what we all would probably, at least it should be comfortable calling God, or if you want to call it cosmos or whatever, I don't really care, but it's that divine principle. Okay. And so, I would expand on that and say that, that it's, I agree with the church that there is absolutely better ways to accomplish this than others. And I am a Christian today by choice. I was baptized a Roman Catholic as a baby. My parents never went to church. Occasionally we would go to the convent on Christmas. But that was about it. Okay. So I wasn't raised with any kind of spiritual conviction. There were members of my family that were very, I wouldn't call them devout Catholics, but they went to church every Sunday. And when we went to visit them, we would end up getting stuck going, and I hated every minute of it. I hated it. Okay. And then I got my vocation to the priesthood. I'm like, what the hell is this?
Right.
You know?
Hey, look, if you would have come to me in 2015 and said, you're going to convert to Catholicism and do this and do that, I would have been, yeah, right.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was my story, just like you said. And so I left, I left the church, and I ran from this vocation for many years. And then I came back, and then I left again. I came back. I came back because of this one conviction, that after having tried Buddhism, Hinduism, various other metaphysical, new thought, new age, everything. I tried it all. After trying every single one, for me, I'm not going to say this is going to be true for all people, and that's part of what I think is a necessary understanding in this answer. For me, I found that it was the most perfect way to finding God. Some people might not agree with that, but I would caution them, make sure you know why. If it's because you have a bone to pick with the church because you don't like this, you don't like that, some nun was mean to you growing up, whatever, that's not a good reason. I had really bad experiences with the Catholic Church all throughout my youth because I went to Catholic schools. Even though I wasn't going to church, I still went to Catholic schools. And they were not positive experiences. In fact, they were horrendous. They were the worst years of my life. So it's ironic that I'm a bishop today, but that's a testament to what I'm trying to tell you, is that once you find the truth of it and you make that connection, that's where you can find something deeper. And that's what I found in this. So I would say that the Christian faith is the deepest, most connected form of finding God. But that's not to say that a Buddhist couldn't. I was a Buddhist for 10 years. We as Buddhists, we don't call that God. In fact, in some ways, God is kind of an irrelevancy in Buddhism. It's kind of almost a distraction. We want to transcend everything. Buddhists want to transcend everything, even God. And there's actually some good metaphysical reason for that. But overall, I knew that in what I would say that Catholicism only made sense to me after I spent 10 years as a Buddhist. I needed that Buddhism to make sense of my Catholicism. Otherwise, I just felt like I didn't really get it. I can explain that because most people in the Christian faith are not teaching metaphysics.
Right.
They used to. For the first 1,000, 1,500 years, metaphysics was a fundamental part of the Christian faith. But then they just dumped it with the Protestant Reformation and just watered it down to being this faith alone nonsense. But Buddhism is all metaphysics. There's virtually no theology in Buddhism. It's all metaphysics. So once I understood the metaphysics of reality, then I could go back to Catholicism and make sense of it. And then Christianity made sense to me. So what happens to them? Well, it's dependent upon what they cultivate. So if you're a person who's just a hypocrite, I don't care if you're a Hindu hypocrite, a Jewish hypocrite, a Muslim hypocrite, a witch hypocrite, or a Catholic hypocrite. All right. If you're a hypocrite, you're not going to make any spiritual progress. Okay. You're not. It doesn't happen. Okay. You're going to become, you're just going to be another version of apathetic. That's just another form of apathy. And spiritual apathy, as you know, because of all of our clients, that's the number one reason that people have spiritual problems and get spiritually ill. And then they need somebody like me to come in and help them.
Absolutely.
That's why. Yeah. I mean, you know that. Mm-hmm. And I think most of our audience knows that. So it's not about the religion you practice as much as it is about your conviction. Do you actually cultivate that relationship with God? Whatever you think God is, whatever you understand it to be, whatever you're most comfortable connecting with, are you cultivating that? And if you are, then you are getting a part of Christ in that. It might not be as much as what I might get out of the Mass. I don't know. That's up for you to decide.
Everybody's different. I mean, I never felt more close to God than when I was studying shamanism.
See?
And I was in the woods,
Yeah.
meditating
Yeah.
amongst the animals. I never felt closer to God in any church.
And see?
But there's a connection there.
There is.
It's all connected.
And I bet you anything that the only reason that you got comfortable with what we do now is because you have that as the foundation.
I do. I mean, I went through, oh my gosh, I was pagan for a while and shamanism big time.
Yeah.
And it's all connected. Once you try the several different religions, you realize that the source is all the same. It's just interpreted differently.
Exactly. So I think as far as, what happens to them, what happens to them is what they want. So I'm a firm believer that there's no free rides in life or in death. Okay. I would say that this is, I think, fundamentally what people mean when they talk about karma. And you hear people talk about karma. I mean, it sounds like, if you're a bad person, bad things eventually happen to you. You got to burn it off. And there is some actual metaphysical truth to that, but it's not exactly as it's being made out to be. What it really is that the universe is one giant mirror. It reflects back your intentions. If you are a nasty son of a bitch, then the universe is just going to throw nasty son of a bitch energy back at you and all around you. And everyone's going to hate you for it because they're going to feel it too. That's kind of how the universe works. It's a big mirror. If you put out a lot of love and compassion and want to help people and your goal is to, service other people, then that's what you get back. Now, not immediately. Sometimes you might take 10 or 20 years of compassionate work before finally the universe comes around and says, now we're going to give you back what you've been
I think I've said this before.
Time
whatever faith you practice, it all comes down to basically one sentence. Love each other and don't be an asshole.
And is that what Jesus said?
That's all you need.
That's what Jesus said. That's basically the vernacular of Jesus when he says, I give you a new commandment. Love the Lord your God with all your heart.
And all your soul.
All your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. She just gave you the vernacular version.
Yeah, I gave you the modern day Jamie version.
But that's the truth of it, okay? That's the truth of it. So I would say what happens to them is dependent upon what their intentions are. If they're very sincere Hindus, they're going to do very well. In fact, they are going to do very well as opposed to a Christian or a Catholic that is going into their faith as a hypocrite. So I would much rather be a sincere Buddhist or a sincere witch. I'd rather be a sincere Satanist than be a hypocritical Christian. All right? I'm going to be completely flat out honest with you. I'd rather be a sincere Satanist than a hypocritical Christian any day. Because guess what? The sincere Satanist is going to have a better chance. Absolutely. Without a question.
Don't be lukewarm.
Yep. No. And Jesus says this throughout so scriptures, it's already scriptural. You don't even have to accuse me of heresy. I can prove it to you. It's right there in the book of Revelation. Okay. I'd rather you be hot or cold, but because you're lukewarm, I shall spew you out of my mouth. He hates hypocrisy. And Jesus is constantly talking against hypocrisy all throughout the Gospels. It is a very clear message. It is very, very clear. So it applies to all things. So I would say that a person that's not Catholic or Christian or never was exposed to the gospel will do just fine as long as they cultivate the faith that they do have. as long as they're doing it. If they're just, sitting on the couch all day, watching TV,
Practice with sincerity.
doing nothing with their life, well, yeah, then the universe is going to give you nothing back. And maybe you'll die and become nothing because that seems to be what you want. And it gives you what you want in the end. So makes sense. I'm sure. I don't know. Do you have a question? Because I know, Brandon, you kind of act as the liaison to some of these questions that come in. So if you feel like that wasn't complete, let me know and give me a rebuttal.
Actually, I think, to be honest, that was probably the most complete I've ever heard anyone say.
Oh, well, good. I'm glad.
No sugarcoating on this podcast.
That's good news.
Not like it is.
Yeah, that's good news.
Because I've asked a couple other people within churches that I've went to, and the answer has normally been the same. They're going to hell.
They're going to hell. Yeah.
Of course, they don't know what to say, so they're going to say, "Oh, they're just going to hell." Well, we're the no bullshit church, so we don't subscribe to that nothing.
Let me make it very clear to everybody listening and into perpetuity, because once these shows are archived, people could be finding them, who knows, 100 years from now. I don't even know how long this show will last. But let me make it very clear to everyone, okay? No one ends up in hell unless they want it, okay? Hell is absolutely a choice. And you go there because that's exactly what you want. Okay. So I think that's all that can be said about that.
I guess you could also add that people have power over their own actions, their own intentions, that no one made them.
Absolutely. Personal responsibility.
A question that comes up a lot is what is that sin that Jesus talks about in the Gospels? That's the unforgivable sin. It's like, blaspheming the Holy Spirit. But what does that mean? And I've heard so many convoluted suggestions, not even say that. People will talk about it authoritatively like they actually understand what that is. And they don't, because I've heard all these answers and none of them are the accurate one. Blaspheming the Holy Spirit. What is that? What is the sin that God cannot forgive you from? Because God can do anything. Okay. So this must be a pretty bad sin if even God can't forgive it. So what is that sin? It is being unable and unwilling to forgive yourself. Because he will not violate your freedom. God will never violate your freedom. So if your choice is to perish, if your choice is to punish yourself for all eternity, he's not going to interfere with that. Which means that if you refuse to forgive yourself by going to the sacrament of reconciliation and actually forgiving, asking for forgiveness for your sins, looking for reconciliation with God, if you're refusing to do that, or if you feel that you're beyond redemption, then you are. God can't touch you because he's not going to violate your freedom. That would be against the relationship we have with him. He's not a spiritual rapist. Okay, he's not going to enforce his will on you. This is what people don't understand about God. They see God as like some authoritarian. No, he's the complete opposite. If you had to put a political party on God, he's a libertarian. He will absolutely give you your freedom, even if it's not for your best good, even if it destroys you, because he will not stop you from destroying yourself.
Yeah, when I was a cop for all those years and dealing with people either going to jail or when I worked the jail, they'd have church groups come in, different religions.
Yeah.
And we'd have to sit up there and basically babysit everybody while they're having their service.
Right.
But they would get to talking and have like devotions later, and they would talk about, do you all think that you can be forgiven? And the most common rebuttal from the inmates was, the things I've done, God will never forgive me.
Yeah, I hear that. We hear that with clients.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, it's
actually he will. I mean,
there's nothing he can't forgive, but you have to be willing to accept his forgiveness.
And be sincere in it.
You have to accept his grace. And if you refuse his grace, that's the blaspheming of the Holy Spirit, because the Holy Spirit's free. So if you reject the Holy Spirit's grace, how can God touch you? He's not going to violate you. He'd have to violate you to interfere with that choice. That's why it's unforgivable. It's not because God can't touch it. It's because God will not violate his relationship to us. Okay, he lets you do it. That's how the fall of man happened. That's the whole story of Adam and Eve. That's what it means. People are like, why did he let that happen? Well, of course he let it happen. It's not a real
Do you wanna
story.
be a
It's a
slave?
metaphor, but exactly. We can be slaves. God doesn't want slaves. God wants to raise us up to his level. That's the entire point of Orthodox theosis. Okay. To bring us up to his level. He raises us up. The resurrection's not just about raising the dead. It's not about rising from the dead. It's about rising up to God's level, to be co-creators with him, to stand in the kingdom and build the kingdom with him. That's what he's calling us to. And if we don't think we're good enough for that, well, he might try to reach out to you, but if you reject those attempts, then he lets you do it. He lets you accept failure. And then the result, the consequence of that, it's not a punishment. Hell's not a punishment. Okay? Hell's not a punishment. Hell is a consequence.
Yeah.
It's just a simple cause and effect relationship. God doesn't send you there. You send you there. You send yourself there. That's how it works. All right? That's actually good Christian theology too. You're just not going to hear many pastors talk about it because they don't get it either.
Well, it's a condition, not a place.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's not a location. It's not a place you go.
That's a whole other podcast.
It's a state. And I'll tell you right now, there's a whole bunch of people in life right now who are living out their own personal hells. They don't need to die to experience it. Okay? Hell can be a very real place right now in your own reality. And you're the one that puts you there. So that's the answer, Brandon. I hope it's sufficient for our quorant.
So would that kind of be why the church says, or that church claims that no one is in hell? What would that be a reason why?
The church doesn't say no one's in hell. The church says it can't confirm anyone's in hell. The church acknowledges the existence of hell, but it can't say that it knows definitively anyone's there because the church doesn't declare that anyone's in hell. It will declare people are in heaven, and that's what a saint is. So when you have like Saint Teresa, Saint Francis of Assisi, these are people the church has said there is direct evidence through our investigation that confirms that this individual is in the kingdom of heaven, because there's certain miracles that they have to perform, and they couldn't do those things if they were not in the kingdom. They weren't operating through God's grace. So we know that that's how, there's other ways, but that's just a simplified version. But as far as hell goes, no, it's never said anyone's actually there. Even Judas Iscariot, we don't know. And the church will never say, and there's a good reason for that, because it would be taking on the judgment of God to say so. Human beings do not have that right. We are not to judge anyone.
We think we do.
We cannot judge people. We cannot judge where they're at, and we have to be open to every person's individual relationship to God, because we don't know how God's going to reach them. And sometimes God is unexpected in his ways. He might reach people on levels that we do not understand, and we have to be accepting of that, because that's his choice. Right? That's his choice. That's not for us to say. So to say that someone's in hell is to serve as a judge.
Right.
We don't have the right to say that.
Sure don't.
So
Didn't quite think of it that way.
yeah.
I guess one more question,
Okay.
if we have time.
Oh, we do.
A little bit.
We got about 15 minutes, so we got plenty of time.
Oh, okay. So this particular question, I was going through YouTube as I normally do, and different videos will pop up to me and kind of get my attention.
Right.
And this video was titled, "Why Did God Command the Old Testament Killing of Women and Children?" So that I kind of raised my eyebrow at that, and I was wanting to actually ask about that.
Yeah. Okay. So they're probably talking about things like 1 Samuel and various places throughout the Old Testament where God seems more like a vindictive son of a bitch than the loving person that we know. And
He had a bit of a temper. a little attitude problem.
It sounds like that. And that's why this is why the Gnostics felt that that the God of the Old Testament was actually the demiurge. Mm-hmm. Because they're like, this does not look like anything that Jesus says his father's like. So this can't be the same God. And there's a lot of, confusion about this. So I guess let's try to clear it up. Okay. Because there's a few answers to this question, a few reasons that we have to break down in order to understand why there's things like that in the Old Testament. And then you don't really see that. It's like, how do you go from an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, and then turn the other cheek? And, if somebody takes your shirt, well, if someone takes, takes your, I forget what it is. If someone takes something and then it's like you give them your shirt too or something like that. Anyway.
Right.
Here's how it goes. Okay. This is the breakdown. First of all, most of the things that we have in the Old Testament are God interacting with the political leadership of his people. So he's not interacting with the church because the church hasn't been established yet. Church doesn't get established until Jesus comes. Prior to Jesus, there is no church. God's interaction with man is always through the government system. So this is why you have the judges first, and then eventually they become kings, right? With King David being the prolific one.
God knows he was a handful.
Yeah, he was. But God is interacting through the leadership, both with the political system and then the priests that are connected to the political system. Political systems have a different relationship and moral responsibility than individuals do, or even the church. So the church is never supposed to, because of what it is and how it operates, is never supposed to carry out an execution. Okay? It did. The Spanish Inquisition, some might say the Crusades in some places, but that is absolutely sin. And that is absolutely reprehensible and unacceptable.
Amen.
Okay? Crusades, not so much, but the abuses that happened and the Spanish Inquisition, definitely.
Well, anytime you have man involved, there's going to be corruption.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's because the church became political. Okay? It was never supposed to be political. It's not a political entity. But when you are a political entity and you're endorsed by God in the form of the judges that eventually became the kings of Israel, the relationship and responsibilities and the moral responsibility was different. Now we have to, in order to understand, that's the first part. That's your preface. Now to understand the rest of the picture, first we have to understand what is the consequence of the fallen nature of man? Death. Okay? And what is if God had a motive, what is God's motive? To make everything perfect again. Well, typically, if you let's make this a very simple analogy. If I buy a house that's rotting away because it's been abandoned for like 30 years, it might be beyond salvage, right? It might be deteriorating to a point that it's not something that can be reconstructed or refurbished in any way. So the easiest and most financially suitable way to handle that is to probably knock it down and build something new. So if your goal is to bring perfection back to the universe because we broke it in the fall of Adam and Eve, right? That whole metaphorical, allegorical story. They're not real people, by the way, as we've talked about before. Adam and Eve are not real people. This is an allegory about the ineffable things of God, that it's a way to help people to understand something that is beyond them.
Wrap our little monkey brains around it.
Brain. Yeah, exactly. It's a way to kind of comprehend it. Okay. So the fall of man, we screw up the perfection of the universe. God brings us back to perfection. But before that happens through Christ and the church, it was about clearing the way to build something new. The kind of evils that existed at that time was so prolific that in the plan of salvation, sometimes it was better to just wipe it all out. And since they were all dying anyway, because that's the consequence of the fallen nature, and nothing imperfect can exist in the new kingdom, what's the problem with that? We take offense to it because they're like, oh, my lives matter. Our lives matter. Our wife and my wife and kid. But the fact is, the only consequence that is acceptable for sin is death, because nothing imperfect should exist at all. We should be existing in a state of perfection. The only reason we don't is because we choose imperfection, and death is the consequence. That's where entropy comes from. Okay? That's why this entire universe is burning itself out. And in so many billion years, it will do so. Okay? So we have to also understand that the plan of salvation sometimes requires starting anew. This is what the flood was about, by the way. Noah's Ark and all that stuff. That's another allegorical story to kind of explain this. All right. Now, fast forward to a few other points that's very important to understand about this. We also have to understand in our arrogance that we have absolutely no right or any say to anything that happens in this cosmos. The only right that we have is by the grace of God that we exist, and that is truly a gift. Okay, it's absolutely a gift. We have no claim to it. We don't deserve it. We don't have a right to it. The right that we have to it is affirmed by the Holy Spirit, because the Holy Spirit affirms that we should have this because it loves us and God loves us, but we don't deserve that. Death is the only thing we deserve. Fortunately, we have a God that's perfecting us, so that's no longer an issue like it was before the plan of salvation was fully realized. And that brings us to the final point. The Jewish people at the time of the writing of the Old Testament did not have the revelation of God yet. God was a mysterious figure. They haven't had the incarnation of Jesus yet. They hadn't known God in the flesh because they didn't even know that was possible. So their understanding of what God was doing was limited to how a human would interpret it. And so sometimes they might see the cruelty of the universe as being, boy, God's mean, God's vengeful, God's vindictive, because that's their capacity to understand it intellectually. When in reality, it's that the plan of salvation is far beyond you. You're not even there yet. You won't even understand this for another 500 years, assuming you could even live that long, which you can't because you're going to die. All right. So it's kind of arrogant to even ask the question, why would God command the death of women and children in the Old Testament? Because it's like, isn't it his right to do so? We caused our death, and now he's got to fix the mess. And sometimes fixing the mess is to just get it all out of the way. But he didn't do that. He really didn't do that. And most of the time when you look at these moments in the scripture, it's to try to see what man's going to do with this information. It's almost as if God's talking to be like, okay, now what do you think of this?
It kind of reminds me when I was a kid. It just popped in my head. I used to love Lincoln Logs. Like that was my jam.
Yeah.
And I'm very blessed to be able to live in a log cabin now.
All right.
But I used to, it's like you're building your log cabin from your Lincoln Logs, and something just ain't right, and it's not working.
So you just tear it all down.
You take your little hand across the table and you rake that crap off and you start over again.
And who's going to blame you if you do that?
Nobody.
No one.
Because you're trying again.
And isn't it your right to do so?
Right.
It's your creation.
It's my Lincoln Logs.
It's your Lincoln Logs.
That's right.
And see, we think that we're something special or that somehow we're separate from God, but we're not separate from God. We are basically of God's essence. And when we act imperfectly, we become an infliction upon the divine nature. And that should not even be the case. The only reason it's allowed is because God loves us. I mean, honestly, he should just eradicate us, but he doesn't do that. He doesn't do that because the plan of salvation is much more complex than that, far beyond our limited understanding. And so a lot of these things that you see in the Old Testament are reflections of that, not understanding how God operates. And remember Abraham? You know, God wants to wipe out all these people, but Abraham pleads. He's like, well, if you can find like 50 righteous men, how about 40? How about 30?
How about 10?
You know, how about 10? What about 2? If I can find 2? And God continuously relents because he's trying to show us how we need to be. So what looks like vengeance is actually extreme compassion, but the Jewish people weren't ready for it yet, because Jesus hadn't revealed the fullness of the plan of salvation yet. They were still waiting for a Messiah that was going to come and kick the Romans' ass. They were waiting for a Messiah that was going to take over politically. And what did they end up with? A guy that dies on the cross. And they were not able to reconcile that. They could not get beyond their misunderstanding. And that's what made it. And look at who became the Christians. It wasn't the Jews.
The pagans.
It was the pagans that became the Christians. It was the Greeks and the Romans that ended up becoming the Christians. And that became Western civilization for the last 2,000 years. So clearly God knew what he was doing. But, it's not exactly as it looks. Sometimes God is doing things to try to get us to think a little bit more or outside the box. And that was one of those times. So most of the time when you look at it, that's what it is. But let's not forget, okay, God in the Old Testament is never talking to individuals. He's always talking to an establishment. Okay, so just like, you might have a commandment that says, thou shalt not murder. Okay, but going to war because your country is being invaded and having to kill the enemy's soldiers is not murder. No, you are defending your territory. You're defending against an unjust invasion. That is not murder. That's a very specific kind of circumstance that a government has the right to initiate because they operate under a different morality than an individual does. Okay? We're not supposed to go out as an individual and become a vigilante and start wars and, go and kill high-profile people. People try and do it. But Batman's not what God's all about, okay? The reality is that when God's speaking in the Old Testament, he's talking to the establishment. And the establishment was operating out of a very cruel and evil world. And God's purpose is to get rid of and eradicate that evil. And sometimes that meant that people died. But they didn't understand exactly what the end goal was, which is, of course, salvation. And what happened? Because the righteous who died before Christ, the howling hell occurred. And Jesus still saves them, even those that died before. So the cross, theologically, the salvation of the cross happens retroactively. And that's the real beauty of salvation and why I just love the Christian faith. But that's all the time we have for it, Brandon. Thank you so much for those questions this week.
I know. Thank you for having me
some
on.
good ones.
Hope I can find more.
Yeah, well, next week we'll do it again.
All right.
All right. Thank you, my friend.
Now we're getting into meat and taters.
We are. Okay, so let's go ahead and break here at the top of the hour. When we come back, we've got Natasha Venter about mediumship. And I guarantee you, this is going to be a blast. You're going to have a good time with this.
It's going to be good, folks. Pay attention.
Yeah, don't go away.
breaking down. If the lightning comes to strike, I'll be the projection on the wall that it lies. A carousel line, just look into the sky and follow the lights. I'll fade in my own hands, gleam in my eyes. Give me the thunder, hear the thunder, cozy thunder, right now. Give me the thunder, hear the thunder, cozy thunder, right now. Give me a give me the thunder, the thunder, cozy thunder, right now. Give me the thunder, the thunder, cozy thunder, right now. Don't feel stressed at all, overcame my fear. I feel so comfortable, my mind is clear. To the sun, run from the sun. Patience, desire once you walk through the dawn. Hear the thunder, cozy thunder, right now. Give me the thunder, hear the thunder, cozy thunder, right now. Give me the
Welcome back, everyone, to the second part of Vestiges After Dark. We are about to start tonight's subject on mediumship with our very special new guest, Natasha Venter, who's here with you for the next 2 hours to talk about mediumship and the many misconceptions that might exist about the work. You're going to get the inside scoop on this one, and I'm very excited to bring this guest on because she comes very highly recommended by our wonderful friend, Regan Forson, who was here last week. So you don't want to miss this. Don't go away. everyone. Thank you for waiting through the break. I think you're going to really enjoy what we are about to start here on this next part of Vestiges tonight. I mean, I'm really excited about this. Our guest tonight is Natasha Venter. She is a lifelong natural-born psychic with abilities that guide all of us through the bumps along the road in life. She easily travels to any lifetime dimension and Akashic record. She's been described as a bridge between worlds, as a gifted dimensional animal communicator, a reader of energies, and in her work, lovingly assisting people through grief and other challenging times. Let her lifelong intuition and over 30 years of experience guiding clients with her readings, healing meditations, life coaching, and feng shui consultations enlighten and inspire you. You can find out more about her at her website, www.angelicclarifications.com. That's www.angelicclarifications.com. I think you can contact her over there and everything, and you'll find out anything you want to know. But actually, you don't really need to do that yet, because we have her here with us right now. And on the next part, we're going to be taking your questions from the chat room, and you can even call into the show if you want to speak with her directly. But let's not waste any more time and welcome Natasha Venter to the show. How you doing tonight, Natasha?
Hello, Natasha.
Hello, and I am so grateful to be here. It's just been a gift, and I've heard Regan talking about you guys, and I started watching you guys, and it was like, oh, I just can't wait to be on this show.
Awesome.
It's a unique platform because we've got some very unique people here. I think we attract people that are in sort of what I call the Shadowlands, because they don't fit into the conventional Christian establishment. At the same time, they also understand that there's a whole lot more than just Christianity out there. They might affiliate with the church in some capacity, but they don't feel like any church really welcomes them because they've got other interests, things like mediumship, tarot cards, whatever. And they don't really feel that there's a safe place to engage that, because as you probably have encountered, most Christians condemn those kinds of things. So here we're trying to sort of undo some of the damage of the last 500 years or even more. And maybe, it's a small part, but we're destigmatizing and trying to show people that there's a lot more to life than just the rigid paradigms of the past. And we can actually still be Christians and explore other avenues as well. It doesn't take away from one discipline to explore and become proficient in another. So you are very welcome here, and we're very blessed to have you with us.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, because I was listening to you earlier, and it's amazing how man, in the humanness, I call it, has messed up so much of what God, as I call him, the greater, the divine, whatever you want to call him, has set up for us. Man has messed it up.
Yeah, we're a hot mess.
Because we have had free choice within a reason of doing things. And we kind of get separated from what our life lessons are to help us greater our soul walk.
Right.
Compared to what it is with the humanness of just being human and throwing our lives in the garbage, type of.
But see,
it's a tricky place to be.
And that is such the beauty, though, because I sometimes encounter a lot of atheists attacking me because, I'm just public enemy number one. I'm a bishop, so they hate me. But, atheists will often, although not all of them, because we actually have some atheists that are benefactors of this church, because they love what we do so much, which I think is so wonderful, and we thank them for that. It tells me I'm doing something right when you got atheists that actually support and donate to your church. But no, the reality is the very hostile ones will say, if God existed, he'd stop child abuse. He'd stop all this suffering. And it's like, so what do you want? You want to be a automaton? Is that the kind of relationship you want with not just God, but with yourself? You don't want to have any freedom at all. Your freedom and the fact is, this is the problem. We can sum up the world's problem in one very simple statement. We have all the power of the universe, but with a very limited capacity to understand it. So we don't know our power. Is that the truth?
Yeah, we're spoiled children.
We are. We have to grow up.
Spoiled. Yeah. Yes.
But this is a playground.
I was watching another show that, because I'm very dyslexic. I really didn't read until after high school. So
Okay.
I really didn't get a lot of I got my knowings, as they're called, from just being me, by sitting in with me, with my soul walk. And so with that there's a lot of language I won't use that is book smarts.
Right.
I use my knowing smarts. And so with that I was listening to someone who was talking about spiritual quantum physics, and I'm like going, I live that. At the same time, I'll go and help. I do 4 hours a morning working at an elementary school.
Oh, wow.
So
okay.
I can work with quantum physics and then deal with a kindergartner who's blowing up.
Yeah.
So it's like I deal with the 3D world all the time compared to what spirituality is meant to be.
Yes.
And so I bring my spirituality in a discernment, I use the word.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that, as I've been hearing from my guides, that I come in the back door a lot with a lot of my knowings to give grace to a lot of people. I walk into a classroom and they go, Tasha, you're here. Because I just bring in love. I bring in kindness. I bring in support. I bring in non-judgment.
Yeah.
Like you were talking about.
And I think that's the key. I mean, because that is actually the fundamentals of not just the Christian faith, but just about really every faith, because nobody just does it very well. I mean, you can't have like the last 2,000 years of Christian hostility that happened against the Jewish people or against anybody that did not believe like them, which you see with Spanish Inquisition being an example, and think that you're actually doing your religion right. Same thing with like Muslim terrorists. This is not the religion of Islam.
Not even remotely.
Sufis do a wonderful job with Islam, but the conventional Muslims, not so much. Same with Christians. Conventional Christians, they don't do such a great job with it. And the reason is that they have created a god, an idol, out of the belief system. They have completely divorced themselves from the actual God that is. So I find, and the reason why I do what I do and why I have a show like this and we have wonderful guests like yourself on, is because by exploring all of the various avenues freely, we can get a bigger picture of the authenticity of God. And that's kind of what we're doing here tonight. So I'm glad that you could be a part of it with us. It's a fantastic.
Well, thank you. Yes. I actually have a basis because I live up in Washington. And when I was growing up, they started busing kids. Yeah. And I would have been bused over an hour. So my mom and dad helped me go to St. Alphonsus. And so I grew up in the Catholic church or in the Catholic schools. And it was interesting because I had St. Peter as my guide when I was growing up. Oh. His name was Peter, actually. I knew him as my best friend, Peter. He was my guide. I was an only child. I didn't have any kids to play with. So he was my friend that would play with me. And so with that when I was going through my life, that he would help me. And so when I would have to go in for confession, they would say, what are your 3 sins?
Whoa. Hey.
Wow.
Good afternoon to you too.
I didn't go to bed when my mom told me to. Let's see. I stole cookie out of cookie jar. Because I didn't do anything. I knew better. It's like when I was a teenager, even I got in trouble one time because I didn't call my parents when I was late. I had drugs going across my plate. I had alcohol given to me. It wasn't my story. I knew right. I couldn't do it. And so I don't have that call to, sin, but yet I would be sitting there in church, on Sunday and seeing people come to church and praying for forgiveness. And then on Monday, go out and go and be mean to people. And I'm like going, this is in my own, 7-year-old brain was trying to comprehend.
Oh yeah. Sometimes they can barely make it to the parking lot before they're talking bad about somebody they just sat with.
I know it.
That's true.
And it was a contradiction to me because that's not who I was. That's not what I knew, because I knew in myself what God, spirituality, love, that divine love was, and that was not it.
Yeah.
And so I've had that contradiction since I was growing up.
So would you say that's how it started for you? Or like, I guess, where did you come to the realization that something was different, in the sense that you were connecting with spirituality at a level that was not typical or common?
So I have a remembrance from the minute that before I came into this world of being born. I remember sitting up in a hospital room, and I remember seeing the doctor, the nurse, my mom laying on the table. This was in the 66, so it was pretty stark. My dad wasn't there. Men weren't really in the room at that time, and
right.
And then I remember coming through my mom and all of a sudden popping out and seeing this doctor with a white mask, a white cap. He was not necessarily, he was a little round, in his features, and, he was an older doctor, feeling and that kind of stuff. So I remember doing that. I also remember my mom picking me up out of the crib. And this remembrance is of, like a new baby where, the head is back and all of a sudden, the head is picked up and you see the person that's holding you.
Right.
And so I remember that, but I can see my mom's clothes. I can see her face. I can see the joy. I can feel the joy in her. And so with that, what is a baby looking through eyes? They can barely see at that time. Their eyes aren't even formed. So I know my soul was awake early in this time. I remember more before 3 o'clock, my third year of life, than I do really through a lot of my life because I was so awake at that time.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, and it definitely reflects the things that I have also come to realize in my own life, that it's not so much that it's a special gift. The gift is the realization, because most people just haven't made it yet. But once you make that realization, then the whole world opens up to you and all of this becomes available. And some of us, for whatever reason, are sort of born with that proclivity like you are.
Yes. And I've done this, and I have everybody's beliefs is their belief, whatever they want to believe in is theirs. My knowings, my truth is I've lived many lifetimes being a psychic, being one who knows much. I being a Wiccan, being a witch, being, somebody who's religious, somebody who wasn't, I've spent many lifetimes doing this work.
Sure. Yeah.
And so with me in this lifetime, it's about me shining my light. Shining God's light, shining the light of love, shining the light of what is that true calling of what love is. And so with that's what I was meant to do in this lifetime.
I mean, that's just fascinating. So with mediumship, how did you enter into that? I mean, that seems like a natural segue, but at what point did you realize that you were connecting with things that were sort of outside yourself and non-corporeal?
Well, I grew up in a house that I hated going downstairs to go to the bathroom because all I heard was psh, 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 psh.
You hear voices.
Trying to get your attention.
Getting spirit. Yeah. My dad was very intuitive too. So with that he knew things were going on. And I also had a gentleman that would come around my room or come around my door, peer around the corner and look at me. So I'm growing up as a young kid feeling like somebody's watching me when I'm sleeping. You know how many stuffed animals I had around and how many Hail Marys and all the prayers I would do, just for protection.
Yeah.
And, I would see, people in like the 1800s clothing in our front room. And, there's just these things that I just knew that there was more out there than just us. And my grandfather passed away in the house I grew up in. And I always kind of felt now I didn't do mediumship young, but I always had that understanding that there was other things besides just us in the human form. Understood.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's interesting because I always ask this of every medium we have on the show. We haven't had a lot, but we've had enough that I've always find it an interesting answer to see what the answer is and see if they're similar. But when you see them and hear them, is it like you're hearing and looking at me right now? Is it that clear? Is it that physical? Is it almost to the point that if you weren't paying attention, you would mistake the person for being a living person in your house? Or is it very clearly sort of like an internal experience that it's a vision of some sort or an apparition?
Well, I have all the Claires and a couple more.
Okay.
Okay. So you're good friends with Claire.
Yeah. So with me, that when I get a knowing that somebody is there. I get the feeling. There's the feeling that they come in.
Yeah.
And then I get like a movie in my head, and then I hear what they're saying. And as they're saying things, they almost show me pictures of what they were talking about. So like if they're saying, I want to give a rose to my girlfriend, who's sitting in front of me, I'll see the yellow rose and a beautiful stem, and how that person is giving to, it's like that grace. So if they're just shoving it to them, there's a message in that as a, please give this to her. I just really love her, that kind of stuff. So there's a message in the vision that they're giving me too. Sometimes I'll get the smell of I'm smelling like beer, oh yeah, he used to drink a lot, type of thing. So there's these things that you get. But for me, even when I see angels and stuff, I get more of the image in my head more than I do. I see like a shimmer.
Okay.
I see auras and stuff. But
So you do see something with your eyes, but it's kind of like more than that.
Yes. Definitely.
Okay. I see.
Definitely. And it's interesting because it depends on the moment. It depends on the situation. It depends on, at one time, one of the clairsentient could come out more than clairaudient. It's kind of, it depends on the situation and where I'm at. Yes. Like if I'm driving, they'll choose more audio than they will choose visual.
Right.
If I'm in front of something that's going on that's pretty hectic, they'll show me the bigger vision of what's going on, why it's going on. People have always said to me, Natasha, I don't get how you get it. But like in a session, they'll sit down and I'll say, you had some questions, right? And they said, well, actually, all my questions you just answered in the last 10 minutes because they all make sense now because everything that's happened in my life actually means one thing.
Wow.
And so I kind of get the whole image of why something's happening in my life. I walk in a room, oh, that's happening because it's an old soul that's learning how to be a young kid.
Yes.
In this lifetime. It's like I get those messages very quickly.
I mean, that's just fascinating because it is
interesting.
Yeah, because I've known psychics that have been like, do you remember the show with Patricia Arquette,
Yes.
Medium? That was a great series.
It is. But
it was very much implied I know it was based on a real person. I don't know how authentic it was. I think it was very loosely based on that person. But in the movie, it's very much implied that her encounters are almost like she can't even sometimes tell the difference between a real living person and a person who's dead. She'll like wake up and there'll be somebody standing there. Do you ever have anything like that? Or is it always very clear to you what it is that you're experiencing when you experience it?
I have asked my guidance, my protectors to give me a buffer.
Okay.
So that I'm not a grocery store.
Right.
I have time off.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to make a statement here that there are people that are only mediums.
Yes.
And it's kind of like I'm going to give it an example. Somebody who's a car mechanic and they only work on Subarus. They're really good at it. They throw them a Ford. They don't know anything about a Ford.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So there are people that are just mediums and they may have some intuitive sense to them.
Yes.
They really only do that. And so they're very hyper knowing in that department. And I would say that she was one of them.
Okay.
That she was more of that kind of stuff. Long Island Medium is another one that's more, she claims it. I'm not a psychic. Don't ask me about the future. I do mediumship.
Right.
And so with that if you practice something one way, you get really good at it. I was lucky. My dad was a multitasker. I mean, he could work on cars, do wiring in a house, blow insulation in. He was a chiropractor. It's like he did a lot of things, and I kind of got that honestly to myself. So I do a lot of different scenarios, but they all are connected in one, which is energy.
Yes.
It's all about energy, and energy is so impactful. And
absolutely.
One who's passed. Their energy. What does their energy represent? What is their, because, like with my dad has now passed, let's see, my kid is 30 years ago. I had my kids at the same time my parents were passing.
Oh, wow.
And so with that my dad has told me a lot about what it is to be dead, what it is to be on the other side. You know, him and I were like two peas in a pod.
Sure.
We were very close soul groups. If you talking about soul groups.
Yeah.
I always picture soul groups kind of like a ring of a tree. You have the beginning of a tree and then the rings go out.
Right.
And there's different soul groups. Him and I were in the very center group.
Right. Your soul family.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're very close even now.
So that's continued on for 30 years. You've had this connection.
It really has. He's now my guide. So
you did something. You said that you asked for a buffer, because one question we get a lot. Now I'm going to give you a scenario here, and we're going to get into here in a moment, kind of some of the misconceptions that I want to talk about. But I guess this might be one of them. But I know that in the work that we do, and I don't know how much you know about our work, but Jamie and myself, we do a spiritual problem resolution ministry. Some churches call it deliverance. I don't like that term. Some churches call it exorcism ministry. It's accurate, but it's so limited, because exorcism is like
it's a rare thing.
About 0.5% of what we do.
Yes, I understand that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not much.
I've done a couple myself. So
well, there you go. So, and it's rare. I mean, it's not something.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. But most of what we're doing is dealing with people who are not functionally dealing with spirituality. I mean, it's various reasons on that. And one of the things we see often, I mean, I would say, in fact, we're doing a documentary series, and the first case in that series, that hasn't been released yet. It's still not finished. It might not be finished for another 5 years.
My God, it's a marathon.
It is. Well, part of the problem is that clients, it's very hard to get a client that's willing to come on it.
Right.
Because of privacy issues, they don't want to be featured. But sometimes we get, so it takes a while to get it going. But the first family that we had there, and it's a very good example of something that we see a lot, is that when you get down to it and you've done your investigation, you get to the nitty gritty, they think they've got demons, they think Satan's after them or whatever. You find what it really is that they're natural mediums, and they don't know how to control it. They don't know how to deal with it. And so they think they've got all these attachments because they're hearing all these dead people around them. And I have to try to help them. And then the next question is, well, how do I turn it off? I don't want this.
Right.
So I guess the first question for me is, what would be your advice to someone in that? Because I know there's a lot of people watching this show that are probably in that boat and would love to know what the secret weapon is. How do they turn it off, or how do they control it?
Well, it's for me, I can't control it.
Okay.
When I get a download, I get a download.
It just happens.
But I do, and downloads are information. I call them information, or like when a new moon is coming and the energies are going. Oh my gosh, the downloads. I mean, if you're not getting downloads and getting dizzy, it's amazing.
Sure.
But there's different forms of it. Now, I use my own protection, my own body protection, and I use love. I use divine love. So what I ask is, for a metaphor, I tell people this is how I can picture it for them, is like a rainbow, the purest rainbow that you've ever seen. Stand in that rainbow, walk into it, stand in it, and just be in it, and let that divine rainbow come and surround you.
Right.
Let it be with you. Now, if anybody knows about love, there's also something called tough love with it, right?
Right.
And so when you're in a moment and there's something happening, i.e. in elementary school,
right,
and things are happening, I have tough love that says, this is not any good for her. This isn't going to be good for her. But I'm also going to say that if I'm meant to know something, what does love filter?
Yeah.
So whatever comes to me, it comes through love, which then gets filtered for my greater good. Now, I always have the mantra with me. What is this here to teach me? So as soon as I say that, or I know that, then whatever that is coming at me, instead of being the victim of it, it turns it into being proactive for me,
right,
which half of our problem is we believe that we've gotten sabotaged.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that interesting how that is?
So with that, and I've lived with an alcoholic most of my I'm married now 32 years. He's been now sober 11 years.
Oh,
so
wow.
Good for him.
I
Great.
lived with an alcoholic for a lot of years, so I understand living in uck.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, and so with that, and he's a great man, just covered up by alcohol, you know, so there again is another scenario where that there was something of a belief system that he allowed in.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah.
And now
I
that he
understand
knows
that.
better and his spirituality is growing, it's not as much. So then I have that as my personal protection. Now I'm going to turn my screen, and you'll see in this window here,
Okay.
I have stones, I have angels, I have different situations. So I have in my
Great.
feng shui practice has set up protection. I live at a dead end road where I had a neighbor that was doing meth.
Oh boy.
Okay.
She was a dealer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know a little something about all that.
Yeah. You'd be amazed. We didn't have any problems. We didn't have one. The only time my husband's car got broken into is because he went onto the property line. He parked too close to the property line.
Yeah.
So I've done.
You were warded.
Yeah, I warded myself. I did my grid. I gridded my house. I also have a cemetery that's like not even 50 yards from me. So I've gridded my yard. I've put protection up. I've asked the angels. I believe in dragons. I have a dragon that's protecting my house. I use the fae. I believe in fairies. The fae community. I've asked them to protect. Yeah. Me too. I'm one. So I've asked them to help protect my property. So I use my tools, my knowings, my different dimensional walk, you know, the angels. I know that I walk with Jesus, Mother Mary, you know, Michael, Archangel Michael. Like I said, Peter.
Yeah.
Peter was my guide through my whole life. And then I found out when I was a teenager that he was Saint Peter, but he didn't want me to know he was Saint Peter because he didn't want me to put him on a pedestal. And that's the thing is that I don't put anybody on a pedestal because they are my team. They're my support team. And I use them as that. So
right.
when I was having, you know, the drugs and stuff, yeah, I put up a mirror, reflect back what she was giving, you know.
Sure.
I put up a gargoyle, you know. It's all metaphor, but yet at the same time, that metaphor is a belief. And if you have the belief, that's 90% of warding yourself.
Well, see, I say that metaphor is the language of archetypes, and the archetypes are
Absolutely.
the essential cosmic truth of the universe. We, I think, undercut that reality by thinking that things that are in our head are imaginary and the real world's this thing that's out there, but it's actually the other way around. All of this out here was built from everything that's in here, and everything that's in here is an archetypal metaphor that's based upon some of these higher principles that come to us in the form of symbols or the various faces that exist, you know. So it makes sense. It's kind of like when you were talking about, you know, Peter, you know, I was thinking about how those that are Voodoo practitioners understand Papa Legba to be a representation of Peter and vice versa. Kind of that. I mean, part of it's the enmeshment that happens between Catholicism and the islands because they were forced to kind of take on the Christian faith,
right.
but also retain their Yoruba religion. But it also is more than that. There's an archetypal truth to that, so that there is something of Papa Legba and St. Peter, and there's something of St. Peter and Papa Legba, and it's because the archetype is greater than them both.
Yes.
You see what I mean? And
totally.
Yeah, and I think you're connecting, or I think what you're saying there was these metaphors. I think that correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like that's what you're talking about.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. I do speak in metaphors a lot because it kind of helps people get the image of things.
Yes.
Because if you can get the image of things, it makes it more whole.
Yes.
Kind of like for me, I have an understanding that when people see auras, they're actually seeing souls. The energy of a soul.
Yes.
Because I believe that my soul does not fit in my body. I fit with my soul.
Yeah, you
Oh, I
radiate
love
out.
that.
So,
Yeah.
I love
I'm
that.
the skeleton. I'm the skeleton of my soul.
See, I teach my students, hold that thought for a second before you go further, because I really want to get this out, and it's so perfect. I teach my students that the church has got it completely in reverse. The idea is that you have a body, and then in that body is a spirit, and inside that spirit is a soul, when in reality, it's a soul that's projecting a spirit that projects a body. Do you agree with that? Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, I totally
In reverse.
agree with that.
Right.
I totally agree with that.
Fantastic.
And I also have an understanding my soul has a mind.
Yeah.
And so it has its own, but that's the Akashic records in a way.
Yes.
You know, so it's that whole process of who we can be and what we're going to be. So when we're seeing somebody's aura, we're actually seeing the energies of our soul.
Yes.
And that's where I can spread my soul out. Let's say I grew up in a town of Seattle, which is, you know, it's a town, it's a bigger city. And so when I would be walking down the streets, I'd go for a walk after work. And so I would send out my soul, kind of like cat whiskers, I call it, and kind of get the tickling of what was going on around me. So I knew, oh, wait a minute, I want to walk on the other side of the street.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so part of that is my intuitiveness too, is to know what is the whisker tickling, you know, of going on around me. You know, before I go into a room, I'll have my soul kind of reach into that room and go, oh, okay, I need a little bit extra patience, a little bit extra, not protection, but let me just have my love be with me a little bit more, so that whoever chooses to be around me can either find that love if they need it, or the love will just kind of work around them because it's not their story. I'm never to put my story on them. It's if they want to accept it.
Right. Yeah, that's beautiful, because, I mean, I think that's the only really way to do it the correct way. Otherwise, you're going to imprint something that's not authentic into that person's reality, and then you're not going to get anything of use back. That's how I look at it. You know, I look at something, and getting back into some of the misconceptions, I guess, of mediumship, is that one of the things that I think that I deal with, and people are sometimes surprised, and one of the reasons why I think the Church of Rome hates us so much, is that I do frequently work with mediums in the spiritual work that I do, because I find it helpful. And my goal is I don't do paranormal investigation as a hobby. I don't do it for entertainment. I don't do it for fun. I do it because I want to help those that need it. And
it's a tool.
It's a tool, and mediums have helped with that, particularly the real talented ones.
Yes, because I want to make this disclosure.
Sure.
That I'd never want to speak bad about any medium.
Yes.
But every medium is a human.
True.
And so every medium can have a different aspect on how they do their mediumship.
Sure.
Some of them are a little bit more ego. Some of them are less.
Yeah.
Some of them are truer. Some of them are less.
Yeah.
Some are just beginning their practice and they're very naive, I'm going to call it, in their mediumship.
Yeah.
And there's some of them, like me, who's practiced it many lifetimes and has come into the ownership of it to be able to be who I am. So, you know, so there's a difference. There's difference in how they are. So I'm glad that you search out the ones that are, I'm going to call it more practice truer.
I do. Well, I mean, I think I have the benefit of that just because I have access to a good range of diversity in that.
Network.
And we have some of the best people in the industry that we can work with. So that's always a benefit that not everybody has access to. We just are fortunate. But I know that I still get a lot of criticism for doing it because, of course, there's those parts of scripture that people have interpreted that said, you know, that mediumship is evil and it's against the laws of God. And so I have to come back.
If I didn't have my belief in God, I wouldn't have my tools.
You couldn't be able to do it. Right. And I think that's where I want to start with some of the misconceptions for at least the conventional Christian audience. Is that, well, first of all, I've said this on this show before, so let me just preface by saying that, first of all, Scripture only condemns, when you really get into the original Hebrew and you understand the context of what was being said, Scripture is condemning necromancy.
Yeah.
Not mediumship as we understand it today. That's the first thing. It's just the words are getting used inaccurately because of translations and other things. But most mediums are not necromancers, correct?
I haven't seen one yet, honestly.
No. And that's the thing is that we understand the value of life.
Yes.
We understand the message. Like for me, I did a group mediumship one night where I had 10 women in my circle, and 7 of them lost children, sometimes adult children.
Yeah.
And it was interesting holding space for them and getting messages and the grace that these loving children gave to their mothers, and because they had spent a little time over there to understand the bigger picture and understand why they ended up having the drug addictions and understanding why they were doing things. And I would give language to some of these reasons why they didn't work as well as they did in their humanness. And they would be like, oh, that makes total sense now. I wish I would have known that as they were growing up. It's like, it is what it is.
Sure.
We all have a journey in our lives.
And that is the reality, is that the journey is very diversified. There's enough room for any variable to take place so that nobody's is going to reflect anyone else's perfectly. You might have compatible steps along the way, but I mean, for the most part, it's very unique to each individual, which makes the whole, I think, religious elitism to be kind of foolish, because it sort of negates the entirety of spirituality in itself, which is we're all coming to God, or we're all reaching God from our own place, and God is more than happy to reach us at our own place. So if it's good enough for God, why isn't it good enough for the religious establishment, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And that's where I have an understanding that, how many people are in this world?
Yeah.
8 zillion people, right?
Yeah, way too many.
Somewhere in there. Yeah. Well, there's 8 zillion perceptions.
Yeah.
8 zillion emotions.
Yeah.
8 zillion perceptions, or doings, right?
Sure.
And I have an understanding that the higher power, God, decided to give us different religions because we all speak a different language. And he wanted to give a variance of different understandings so that people would get to know him, a higher power of love. And
it would force all of these various communities to one day finally come together to complete the picture.
Exactly, because if you look at the belief system of all of them, there's something greater that loves.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah.
And if you look at that, and if it doesn't, I'm sorry, it's not a good place to be in that group. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's not about man, it's about something greater.
Yes.
And with that, having those different languages can help us discern. It's kind of like you were talking earlier that you just didn't become who you are today. You had other beliefs, other paths that you brought into this story.
You sure did, yeah.
I know for me, I work with Jesus, Mother Mary, and, angels. I mean, as Archangel Azrael is one of my bigger angels that I work with, because I help a lot of people through the grief process and the death process. And death isn't just the ending of life. Death is, your job ends. Death is the process of going through life-altering experiences. And, and I use a lot of the Native American belief system in the core of working with Mother Earth. It's getting back to home. It's getting, what I love about the Native American, the First Nation, belief system is that it's about the eldership. It's not about old, it's about the eldership. How can we be in the eldership? How can we learn to honor our fellow man? How can we honor the belief that we've had a long time that has worked? How can we do canning, so we honor the earth? How can we, do those things to honor, like when my husband goes hunting for a deer, he honors the deer coming forward.
Always walk the good red road.
And that kind of stuff. So it's about ownership.
Yeah.
And so that's why I like the First Nation so much, because of that the wholeness of what it is. But at the same time, like I was meditating one night, and I was trying to meditate, and Jesus even told me, just give it up tonight. You're too wild. Your brain is going too fast. So, it's like, I work with these beings of love so intimately that it's a blessing.
It sounds like it. I mean, it's profound, really,
cool.
that you would have those kinds of. It's almost a type of spiritual intimacy from the way you're describing it.
Well, okay, so this is said without ego. It's said with knowing.
Sure.
That my soul is. When I've had other people, other mediums who have channeled, other spiritual people, that when they've channeled like Mother Mary, they've called me sister. They've called me, someone who is like them. I actually have a past life where I have a knowing that I was on a war field and I was an angel being part of that work of helping people, helping souls leave, and then also helping them get the courage to crawl themselves off the field, because they had other things to do. And this is a knowing I have. It's not a statement. So with that there's something that I have an understanding of. It's hard to put it. You can't put it in words.
I understand.
You can't put it in words.
Yeah, these kind of experiences are hard to describe.
They are.
Yeah.
I've had. I mean, I guess the way you're describing and knowing, the way you're defining it resonates with me because I've encountered my own, I guess, experiences with this, and you don't get to where I'm at today if you haven't. There's obviously something that's happened to you to get here. So, I mean, I don't talk about it terribly often. I know my audience probably is killing, would kill me to find out. They would love to know more. I don't really talk about it very often. But the best way to explain some of the things that I have encountered is they're not statements like you said. There's no way to convey it in some kind of vocabulary that makes sense. It's just it, and there's no way to really share that adequately. You can kind of talk about it a little bit, but you can't. It's just and it's really. I guess it's meant to be that way because it's meant for you. It's
exactly.
Yeah.
I feel the same way about my NDE.
Yeah, no one really understands.
No one really understands
the way you do. Yeah,
they all try to say, "Oh, you're on a lot of drugs." Yeah, it was my experience, and no one will ever be able to tell me different.
Exactly. And for me, my life, I can say that I've probably had a couple of those, near-death experiences, but it's been just my soul and my body being awake. Right. Me being born has been something that, I have that knowing, like me writing my contract coming in to this world. Let's see. Do you want to be able to eat this? No, I don't. I've been poisoned too many lifetimes. I don't even want to come close to that food, Right. And it's like I have all these things that I said no to that I believe that we can rewrite our contract as we come into this world. So I've been rewriting a lot of my contracts that I started out with because I had an understanding that I needed to change a lot of these things in myself, to become my light.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that because I know that I have people in this audience that I've talked to or they've called in or, we've had interactions where I would know that some would feel that they feel like they've been given dealt a bad hand of cards in their life. So how does one go about, I guess, reshuffling the decks to get a chance at a better situation? How does that? How do you rewrite the contract?
So my understanding of rewriting the contract is, okay, I'm going to use my husband as an example.
Sure.
Okay. Marrying into a husband who I was very naive. I grew up in a family that we didn't drink a lot. I was pretty innocent in a way.
You mustn't be French.
What's that?
You mustn't be French because
or German.
No. I drink this much, and I've got the room spinning both ways at the same time.
I got it. I understand.
So
That's how my mom is.
I don't do good with that stuff. I don't judge it. I just don't do good with it myself.
Sure.
So,
Yeah. Well, it's good that you know this, though. It's good that you understand that about yourself. Some people don't.
From very young.
Yeah.
I knew this from very young.
Yeah.
But so life needed me to have an experience. I needed to have an experience, and I can say that having an experience with an alcoholic man who I love dearly and have loved dearly. Sometimes I loved my house more than I loved him because I was human.
Sure.
but having that stretched and pulled what divine love really was for me.
I see.
It really taught me how to stretch and pull that divine love. So having those experiences going through that negativeness really taught me how to be my better self. Now, going back to the question of how do you turn that contract around? Well, what I did, and full moons and new moons are a great time for this. The energy is more aligned. It's like making a prayer at 11:11.
Okay.
It's that kind of that, unique time to do things. Full moons are about endings. New moons about what do you want to bring into
So it's like liminal space. It's like the sacredness of liminal space.
Exactly.
Gotcha. Okay.
So I rewrote my contract, and I grew up with my dad saying, let's write a goal. So this or something better for my name. And I would always say, I want this as soon as possible in divine timing and in human timing, because they're two different things.
That's for sure.
And so
Isn't
I would write in big letters, I am done with a man who does not like himself. I am calling in a man who will love himself for who he is.
Okay.
I am done with a marriage that is demeaning. I am calling in a marriage that has partnership in the knowings that we are both two unique beings.
So you're making tangible through the expression of writing a new intention.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And knowing though that humanness needs to work through it. So now I did this with electronics. I would short circuit electronics. I can blow electronics out.
Oh,
no
gosh.
problem. Okay. And I know this about
Stay
myself.
calm, Natasha. We want to blow out the contact.
This is such a fragile connection most of the time.
Lord.
No, did you know that houses have auras too? Because I blew a hole in the aura of my house one time.
Oh yeah, the energy. Yeah, our energy is poured into our home, so that makes sense.
Yeah, so it was interesting to see what was on the other side of that aura that I was protecting myself from. So with that with electronics, I rewrote the same thing with electronics. I'm done having misconception about electronics. I am calling in the grace with electronics. But when I would sit down in front of a computer, I would tell my humanness, we're rewriting the contract. This is something new. That's an old belief. We're doing something new. And so I would work on it. Well, today I can tell you I'm producing my own shows. I am downloading, I'm uploading. I still can't wear watches, and I have to ask permission for the cell phone that I use that it will work with me. And I ask the same thing with my computers. But at the same time, though, I have that understanding of that. So now we're working together instead of short-circuiting it. And if I do short circuit, I know I have to check in with my energy.
Sure.
Because it's not the computer's problem. It's my problem.
Well, I mean, I feel, ever since my childhood, I guess one of my knowings, you could argue, was that very early, I realized that all things have a spirit. It's not just living things. Inanimate objects have it. Yes.
Your Native Americans coming out, Bishop.
I know.
No, it's true. Even things that are made have energy. And sometimes that energy gets connected by who owned it first.
Yes.
So
it gives life to it. So it's like it imprints something. And I would even say that our animals take on a part of our soul, which is why they look like us, and after they live with, and they start to act like us. They start to act like us. It's not just a psychological thing; it's an exchange of energy that just happens. And I really think that's what animates them, because I believe the soul is an animator. I think what the energy of the soul essentially is, if you want to break it down to its lowest common denominator, is that it's what animates us. It's what gives us the ability to experience.
Exactly. And it has a personality.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Our soul has a personality, and then we come into a humanness that has a personality.
Yes, and that's where
both of mine are smartasses. I can say that without a doubt.
Well, and that's the difference between my husband being the alcoholic and knowing the man that he was.
Yes, I understand that.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, if that makes any sense.
Oh, it does.
Oh,
that makes perfect sense. Honestly, that's a good note. Actually, let's go ahead and take the break here. We will come back here in just a few moments. Let's take our break and recalibrate and process some of this. And we'll be taking your questions and comments from the chat room. You can also call into the show. I'll get that number up there on the screen and I'll put it out here in just a moment. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
You've been lost and alone in the city of lights, I know. Getting hot, feeling low, and it's out of your control. You should know that I won't leave you. I'll stay beside you. I'm never letting you go. You've been lost and alone in the city of lights, I know. But I will guide you home. But I will guide you home.
Welcome back, everyone, to the third and final hour of Vestiges After Dark. We have been talking with Natasha Venter about her work and her abilities, which is really more about being aware. So I think that's the secret to all of this. Get yourself focused, okay? Then you might be surprised at what's out there in the world. When we come back here, we're going to continue on with our discussion, but we're going to include all of you. So please call into the show if you've got a question, comment, or story for either any of us or Natasha. The number to call is 718-362-6380. That's 718-362-6380. Remember to enter PIN number 855-4111 to get put into the queue. That's 855-4111. International callers can call in free on Skype. Just dial up Eye of the Seer, EYEOFTHESEER, Eye of the Seer, and that will connect you to us. We'd love to hear from you and talk to you. But we also are taking your questions from the chat room, and I can see out there that everyone is having a blast with this one. Natasha, you're quite popular, but we'll be back in just a moment. Don't go away. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us for the third and final hour here. I'm really looking forward to where this goes now that we're including all of you. So I've put the number up on the screen, 718-362-6380. That's 718-362-6380. Enter PIN number 855-4111. That's 855-4111. And we'll take you on. I know a lot of you don't like calling in, and I know that most of this audience is on demand anyway. We only have a small live audience. We're trying to build that live audience so we can get more guest interaction, but I know that you guys will listen to it one way or the other, and I know you like the recording. Probably save it so that you can listen to us on the way into work, on your long commute.
It is a work night, I mean.
It is, and that's part of it. So I get it. I understand. But for those of you who are here, I know that you've got a lot of questions. I was reading some of the comments in the chat, and I can see that you're really loving this show. And Natasha, I mean, they are really eating this up. So we're having a great time.
Scored some friends, Miss Natasha.
Oh, thank you. Yes, and that's the thing is that, it is about spreading the word that, we're not alone, and that we do have help, and that we have more than one path in this world, but yet following the guidance of divine love is the truer one that you can do. And I understand that I understand, like Mother Mary, there was a fight that my husband and I had, and I knew it wasn't going to, and he was pretty drunk, and I knew it wasn't going to be a night I was going to sleep. And I was just like, what can I do? And I called upon Mother Mary, and she came. I felt her come up to my bed, and I said, and she goes, I know, dear. She rubbed my cheek 3 times, and I was asleep.
Yeah.
I know Mother as Mother.
Yes.
And so, and I lost my mom. One of my life stories is that when I was ready to have my first child, my dad passed away 6 weeks beforehand. Oof. And then 3 years later, my mom ended up with Lou Gehrig's disease, and I had my second child. And as my second child was growing and changing, my mom was dying.
Oh my goodness.
And then 3 years later after that, my uncle, my mom's brother, passed away of basically the same disease.
Oh,
and
geez.
so with that, and then I lost my other family members within the 7 years of that cycle. So I had a, cleaning of the house with my family.
It's a rough,
I'm only child, only grandchild. So on that side of my family. So I became the elder very young.
Yeah.
And so with that going through that process of understanding the grief, that really helped awaken my tools. Cause that's one thing that I understand through intuitive work, through mediumship, that the more that you understand grief, the cleaner your practice will be.
Well, let's talk.
I totally agree with that.
Let's talk about grief there, because I'm curious, as a medium, having these deep insights into what comes next. Okay. It's not as much a mystery. I'm sure there's still mystery to it. Of course, we don't get all the answers, but you're not working at an agnostic level where you're like, I'm not sure what's out there. You're not working at an atheist level where like, I don't believe there's anything out there.
Exactly.
I mean, you have a knowing there. You have experienced it enough to know that it's there. So do you find that grief for you is different than it is for the average person because of that connection that you have?
I would say that yes, because it's a human experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so the grief has the human emotions: anger, frustration, sadness, depression, happiness, joy, giggles, whatever comes across at that minute in time, right?
Yeah, right.
And so with that when we're grieving, now I want people to understand that when you are grieving, not going to your favorite restaurant that closed down can be a part of the grief process. So grief isn't just about losing someone. It's about not being able to have what you want, in a way.
Yes.
So then there's different layers of it. And having this point of where I had grief losing my parents, then after my mom passed away, I had a woman who came into my life. I call her my mother of heart. And she was with me for 20 years. And I witnessed her who has lost a child. So I witnessed a woman who lost an adult child.
Yeah.
And so I understand that there's grief. And then you have the grief of a mother, a father, a grief of a sibling, a grief of, and the worst of the one that can derail you the hardest would be the grief of a child.
Yeah. Sure.
It's not, and
it's also an unnatural,
it is
not supposed to happen.
It's
that
not.
way.
Statistically, it's not supposed to happen that way. Although in today's time, I think maybe 200 or 300 years ago, it was more accepted because that's why they had like families of 15 kids, because you knew you were going to lose a few.
Yeah.
The disease was so bad, so rampant. So you expected it was part of life, but it's not a part of life anymore. So it's very tragic when it seems to upset the natural order of things.
Exactly. But I'm gonna backtrack a little bit.
Sure.
And we wonder why the generational detachment of the rough mother, the unloving woman in the house, came forth is because the woman was grieving and couldn't mention it because she was in survival mode.
No, that makes sense.
And so there's a lot of this generational process that we've all been going through, where now we're people of this system where we don't know why we feel a certain way, but it's been generational.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
We've been feeling a lot of stuff. So there's this process. So going through the grief process can really get you really learn in grief that vulnerability is the greatest strength you can ever have.
How would you explain that for someone that might hear that and be like, what is she talking about? How can vulnerability be a strength?
Because when you're vulnerable with yourself, when you understand, I'm angry today. Okay, I'm angry today. I need to take care of myself. I need to be careful who I'm around. That vulnerability can help you be a better citizen. It can help you know yourself better. And so having that vulnerability, understanding that, hey, I'm really tired today. I just can't do it. Instead of being the person that always goes and does it because they're going to be strong, they're not vulnerable with themselves to understand that they are human. They have these emotions. They have this process. And when you learn that you are human, you can honor that in a different way.
You can also be more you can also be more understanding to other people and what they're going through.
Exactly. So with that me witnessing the grief process like I have, and then working with Azrael like I do, because Archangel Azrael is the ultimate timekeeper. He's the one that helps people cross over. He's the one that works through that process. And I also work with Samedi Baron, who's in the, who.
Oh, really? Okay, so you do work with some of the Loa too.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
that's
with
interesting.
that, and he's the guardian of the world. So like he's the one that I ask him to protect my house of the spirits walking by, where Azrael helps the spirits walk on. So if I do my house clearings and there's a spirit in the house or there's somebody in the house, I ask Azrael to come in, Michael to come in, Jesus to come in, and I ask the angels of the house, because we all have house angels, I call them, and do the, and help me with that process of doing the clearing.
That is fantastic. I mean, I don't meet too many people who are not part of the cultural aspects of Voodoo to work with the Loa, and I think sometimes when I mention that I do, and I have had, a plentitude of experiences with the Loa.
My God, our investigation in Reno convinced me.
Well, you saw they imprinted those symbols into my hand.
And the blackbirds coming to take the tobacco I put out. It was an offering. It was crazy.
Working with the Loa is one of the most powerful things I've ever done. But what people don't understand is that I didn't go to try to appropriate this into my spirituality. The Loa came to me. I don't know why. They just did. And I mean, they wanted to work with me, and they really were kind of pushy about it. So, I mean, but it wasn't like something like, oh, that's a cool one, I'm going to go and see if I can get into voodoo. No, it was nothing like that. It was really just that because I think I am very sensitive to spiritual energy.
Yes, I would say you are.
You can tell.
Both of you are, actually.
Yeah,
Both of you are.
We are, makes us good at this work, I think.
Yeah.
But,
exactly.
they came to me. And I mean, I still haven't told all my stories about Papa Legba, but,
You told some interesting ones to me.
You know them.
I mean,
you know them. But
and see, that's the thing with my dyslexia, that I don't know a lot of their names, but I know their content. I know their being.
But you know them.
And
yes.
I know them. Like Mother Mary, she's White Calf Buffalo Woman. She's all these different beings, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Because she presents herself to the person who they are.
Yeah.
Like Archangel Michael. I know him as the fiery sword with the armor on. I also know him in his Bermuda shorts with the cowboy boots and
Michael's my boy, by the way.
And holding a beer.
Sure.
Yeah.
And he's sitting there going, "Oh my God, would they just okay, I'll be there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, so I know these beings, I'm going to call them, for who they are. And I know we're not talking totally about mediumship here, but it is about the encompassing of it.
Yes.
And I have an understanding that I use numerology, I use astrology, I use my spiritualism, I use a lot of different things. But if you look at it, it all makes the hand so I can grab onto my belief a little bit stronger.
Exactly that. Because this show is about the misconceptions of mediumship. And I think we've actually answered it in a way that was so much better than if we just really spent all this time talking about that very thing. Because the misconception is that it's not at all what you think it is. It's not just about talking with the dead and having seances and playing with Ouija boards like people think.
Well, Hollywood did that.
Well, they did, but
I wouldn't play with the Ouija board, by the way.
No,
I don't want to open that door.
But it doesn't sound like you need them.
Yeah, you don't need it.
Well, actually, the one time I did, I remember floating. So I.
Oh, really?
Yeah, probably better stay from that one.
I don't. No, because I have an understanding that when somebody plays, and I'm use the quotation mark.
Sure.
Plays with spirit, they find out they can call in the wrong spirit. I had one student who I was working with. She came to me because she knew that she was seeing spirits. And she said, wouldn't it be so cool if we just did something on the stage? And I said,
Yeah.
No, do not go there. Because if you open the door, you do not know who you're going to get.
Yeah, it's not a game.
Then the universe gave her a chance to be at her friend's house, and she felt that icky energy. And she went, I get why you said that. This is not a game. You don't play with spirit. You use them for the greater good. You be with them. There's a lot of people who are bipolar and having problems with a lot of mental, the different personalities that come in.
Yes.
I have an understanding that some of them, not all of them, some of them are free channelers. They channel without boundaries.
Yeah.
And these beings just walk in, and they choose to have these beings that come in. Like one of my kids had a friend, and she would say, I have this being with me. And I saw them just popping in, and I'm like going, oh,
sounds like the last case we had.
Right?
Yeah. I couldn't tell her. It wasn't my job to change her knowings, because she was actually that person that wanted to be like that.
Yeah.
But then the being that she was channeling, I'm like going, oh, if I'm in the Native American, that's coyote. That's trickster. Mm-hmm. That's somebody who I don't, So then I made sure that my love boundary was a little bit more stronger at that time, because I wasn't going to play with coyote and the kind of coyote that was playing with her.
Right. Sure. Yeah.
So there's that dance of having the ability to have the saying, no, not in my house. People walk into my house and they go, oh, it feels so good, because I've said, not in my house.
Right.
And when I'm laying in bed and I feel like there's something in the house, I say, hey, house angels, can you go check out who it is? And then they come back. Oh, that's nobody. That was a dog, moving around, or, whatever it was, so that it is.
It sounds like you've got this well under control now. But my question is, was there ever a time where, I guess, when you were still trying to work through understanding this ability and this knowledge that you possess, or this awareness that you have by your very nature, was there ever a time where you attracted or collected a very negative or hostile or even demonic force that you had to struggle to get rid of? Was there ever a time where that happened?
I would say no, but I also wasn't as protected. So
as you are today.
As I am today. So like when I was a kid,
sure.
I was really bombarded by noise. Actually, the day that my dad died was the quietest my house that I grew up in ever was. He actually cleaned out that house.
Oh, really?
He passed away.
Interesting.
That's how I always said he had one foot in this world and one foot in the other world.
Yeah.
So there was that part, but there's that time. I know that I'm protected. I have a natural protection. Now, I can tell you, though, that I took off a lot of darkness off my husband when he was drinking.
Sure.
I took off a lot of beings that were mischievous, that were icky. Now, I have also an understanding, working with the Fae. The Fae are not, or I don't want to call them Fae, because the gnomes don't want to be called Fae, but it's like, how do you find the right language?
Well, they're in the Fae category, whether they like it or not.
We tend to refer to them, all of them, as elementals.
Elementals, yeah.
As elementals. So,
yeah.
like my kid really dealt with depression. So I saw a dark being in my kid's bedroom,
mm-hmm.
but it was a dark elemental
mm-hmm.
who was helping use his energy as a vacuum cleaner to clean out the room. Now, I always checked in with that being and said, okay, I know you're dark. I know you're mischievous. You're getting too dark now. Let's go clean you out.
Yeah.
Then you can come back. I took ownership of knowing what was there. But I also have that understanding that darkness is not always darkness.
Yes, that's very true.
That it is part of a usage. So every time that I've had that darker feeling on me, like I went through a really rough day at school and I came home kind of sticky, kind of just heavy, I smudged myself, or I ring bells a lot when I'm done with school, or I clap around my hands
mm-hmm.
to clear out the energy.
Right.
Because I know that I'm not me. There's something that's alternate, there's something that's energetically heavy on me.
Right.
And so I do these things to help clear that energy.
So
there has been times that like when I was very young and very shy, quiet, people don't believe that I was an introvert. I was very shy, quiet. I wouldn't say a word. I wouldn't even go into parties. I wouldn't do anything that was beyond. I was so shy.
Yeah.
And I kind of had this darkness on me because I was depressed. I was low. But as soon as I started finding my inner empowerment, that moment, and there's this image that came to me that those times, like after I went through the grief process and I really got depressed, that I checked in with myself and I found that my inner light was low. You know, like this candle that was burning in me was like really, really dark.
Dark, yeah.
So what I did was this light, I asked my candle to start lighting up. Mm-hmm. And coming out. And so finally, after maybe working on this for a little while, that I would ask that light to shoot out of me, just kind of blast that darkness out of me. And that was one way that I would work through it. So these things naturally came to me, these tools. Like I had the mantra right away, what is this here to teach me? So I would turn from being a victim, which I had practiced quite well at the early in my time in my life, to being who I was on the other side. So these are all these tools, but I want people to know that, if you go to another medium, if you go to someone who's intuitive, make sure they have integrity. Make sure they have high integrity and check in with how they present their work, because not everybody has truth, not everybody has discernment, and and you want somebody who will honor the person who's sitting in front of them to do the work.
That's very important.
And I wanted to kind of throw that statement out before we come to the end. I had to throw that statement out.
I think that's very important because I don't think people really think that way. I mean, I even try to warn people about going to psychics at fairs. You don't know what energy they've been working with, and you don't know how proficient they are at dealing with it. So you could go to a psychic, thinking you're just having a good old fun time, and end up coming home with some kind of negative attachment.
And
because
we've had that happen.
We've had many times, and this is where the illusion. And talk about misconceptions of mediumship. Here's one of them. The misconception is that these things are evil. No, it's people that are not proficient working with stuff, dabbling with stuff that they don't understand, and then they stir up a whole lot of crap, and then it can become something that ends up victimizing the people that they're working with. So I tell people, look, if you're going to a medium, a psychic, anybody that's doing energy work, make sure you know that they are proficient. Make sure you can trust them. Yeah, Reiki master particularly.
Right.
I had a very unfortunate experience with a Reiki master. Made me sick for months.
Yes.
Because they didn't know what they were doing.
Do that.
Yeah.
2-day seminar doesn't make you a Reiki master.
But they wanted to believe that. They want to believe that Reiki masters, like years and years and years of work, but they can go and get this online certification, call themselves this, and they don't know what the hell they're doing.
No, and that's the thing also too. You can have a very, very gifted Reiki master who has a cold. I would not go to them if they're feeling icky.
Yeah.
Right.
I would say, oh, you feel like I'm going to wait till you're feeling healthy, because their energy is conducting the energy.
Yes.
Now, I do psychic fairs. I'm going to say that, but I do one thing. I don't walk around during the day. I usually walk to the bathroom and I come back.
But you also know how to deal with the energy, though, Natasha.
Exactly.
I mean, a lot of them don't. That's the thing.
Well, a lot of them, they say to me, gosh, Natasha, you look the same as you do at the beginning, at the end of the day as you did at the beginning. And I say, because I use divine energy.
Yeah, you're doing something right.
My energy. I use divine energy. So I look this way when I'm done, because it's like, it almost charges my battery up though. This is my soul calling to do this work. My business has really kind of been in an interesting place, and I'm still doing it because it's my soul calling. It's like you guys doing this work.
Yeah.
That you're going against the grain a little bit because it's your soul calling.
Yeah.
You're meant to be someone, yet at the same time kind of create your own path.
Yeah.
And that's the joys of doing this work is that you bring light to somebody's world.
I know what you're talking about with the using divine energy, because there's been cases we've been on where we were going to have to step in, and one of the first things I do is call on St. Michael to assist or to help me.
Yeah.
And I have on several occasions during our Ghost Adventures investigations,
Sure.
I could feel the energy coming through me. And I will tell you, St. Michael's kind of a smartass.
God, yes.
So he would come
You were dealing
through.
with the one wearing the Bermuda shorts, right?
I don't know if he's wearing no, he was ready to throw down on some evil and kick its ass. But
Yeah.
I could feel that
And
energy
that's when-
coming
that's
through
when-
me.
Yeah.
And we did what we needed to do, and I was so full of energy. I was ready to go. I was ready to go take on the world because I had that divine warrior energy going through me. And then it was the next day that I was utterly exhausted for like 2 days. But yeah, when I've called upon St. Michael on a couple of occasions, I have literally felt him. And then when the darkness is trying to argue, I've caught myself smiling at them and basically daring them to do something.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to have that feeling. But you get that extreme burst of energy, and it's not you. It's definitely something coming through.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
But that's where I always, like when I do my fairs and I do my work, that I ask my body to align with that energy. Because people forget, and there's a lot of psychic mediums that even have a hard time being with their body.
Yes.
But they forget to be with their body and check in with their body. So like before I do a fair, I say, okay, body, we're going to be doing this work. We're going to be sitting at a chair. I know some of these triggers are yours, but we're going to do it. So I'm going to take care of you the day before, and I'm going to take care of you the day after.
Oh, we
And
take
a
care of the
lot
day
of
after, don't
times-
we?
Oh, we do.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Didn't mean to interrupt, but we
Usually with
authentic
Chinese food or
Yeah, I'm
something.
sorry to interrupt, but yeah.
So with that there's that grace that we can give our bodies going through these major things, okay, we're going to be channeling body, accept it, please. Let's go forward and do it, and when I do that, then I don't have so much of a crash afterwards.
Yes. Right.
Because I'm more and that's one thing I'm grateful for. My mind, my body, and my soul were all ready for this lifetime because my mind is willing to accept anything. People say, I'm going to surprise you. And I go, oh, I know about that. I may not know about it with the words because I'm like I said, I'm not book smart.
Right.
I'm knowing smart. And I do read. I mean, it's not like I can't read, but I do read more. I read books like The Prophet and that kind of stuff.
Sure.
I don't read the dictionary. It doesn't do anything for my brain. So I learn a lot through life. Life gives me how to be spiritual in the middle of dealing with a classroom of kindergartners.
Makes sense to me. I think we should probably look at some of the questions from the chat right now and see what the audience has to say about this. So what's our first one?
Brandon had one way back.
Okay.
So on the topic of spiritual gifts, is there a gift someone can have that allows them to use the gifts of other people? For example, if a person can see spirits and you can't, but being around this person, you can start to see them too. Is that such a thing?
Yes.
It is.
It is.
Okay.
Because energy collects with energy. It's kind of like the difference between meditation by yourself and meditating in a room. It's easier to meditate in a room because everybody's in that collective energy. So when you are working with those knowings. Now, I also understand that like when I'm having a session with someone, that my team is conversing with their team and their team is conversing with my team. So there's that give and take of, and when I'm talking about team, I'm meaning guides, guardians, knowers of who's around me to help me in my lifetime. And so with that, then they are communion. So a lot of times they're saying, hey, this is something that they know naturally. All of us have intuitive gifts. The difference between me and somebody else is I trust. I trust with all my being that what I'm getting has a truth to it.
Sure.
Now, I say a truth because there's a truth. The truth I know of is divine love. That is the only truth.
Okay.
That's the only one that I know, and that includes God, Jesus,
Right. Right.
the truth. A truth is you believe this, I believe that. Yes, I've seen that. Yes, the car was red. Somebody else will say that's my truth, that the car was green. A truth.
Yeah.
There's different truths, but the only one that I know of that is the truth is divine love.
I like that.
Agreed.
It's very consistent with the theologies of the world. What's our next one?
But go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm looking through, so if you have
Go ahead,
further stuff to
Natasha. What were you going to
discuss.
say?
No, it's just one of those things that when we're in this moment, but I want people to know that when we're going through these hard times, we're going through immense hard times right now in this world.
Oh, yeah.
It's here to break us open like an egg so that we can find truth, that we can find love, that we can find knowings that are greater than us.
So do you see a light at the end of this, I guess, pseudo-political tunnel that we happen to be in right now, particularly in this country, in the United States, where it's so divisive and, there's just so much tension, and you see it in the drivers on the road. You see it in customer service. People are nasty and hostile and agitated all the time. COVID really, all those lockdowns and all of the psychological trauma of the masks and the vaccine controversies and everything really kind of, and the grief, of course, of loss too, has really just like derailed people emotionally to where they're just very hostile. And now you got Russia and China acting up. So do you see a light at the end of the tunnel that we currently are in?
Yes, it's a journey. And I'm saying that in one sentence.
Okay.
Yes, and it's a journey.
Yeah.
It's a journey. We have to work our individual self. Even if we have somebody who is driving down the road, flicking us off, how do we react to them? Mm-hmm. Many of us got to get out of reaction into interaction. We got to get, okay, they had a rough day. They're in a moment. It's not at me.
Yeah.
It's a moment that they're having.
Yeah.
Yes, I could take it personally, or I can just say, screw it.
Yeah.
So how do we take it to where we can get into that moment of grace for others? And, that's the word is grace for ourselves, grace for others, understanding for ourselves, understanding, forgiveness. It's not a simple thing, but I can say, when somebody flicks me off, I have an understanding, and I can have a forgiveness for a moment. And I have this another mantra. I live by mantras. I'm asking for divine healing on this.
Yeah.
I'm asking for divine healing on this. So when I saw the riots, when I see Ukraine, and I see, things going in Africa that we don't even know about, that it's like, I'm asking for divine healing on this so that the greater good can come out of it.
Well, I firmly believe that all things, I guess that's part of also Christian theology as well. All things are coming to the eventual good, even if it seems like the process is uncomfortable. I have faith in that. I have faith in that process. I think my biggest concern for the world is not so much the political divisiveness or the international instability, and I think my main concern for the world is that in people's mistrust of religion, they've thrown the baby out with the bathwater to the point that now they're just become aspiritual. And that's like a really bad place, because you can kind of generate compassion out of your emotions, but if you really explore your emotions, we're not capable of compassion. Mm-hmm. Compassion comes from the divine. You don't have that built within your monkey brain. You don't have it in your heart. We can love, but love is usually selfish. Love is usually about sexual attraction. It's usually about how they make you feel as much as how you make them feel. Mm-hmm. Compassion is completely unconditional selflessness. That's completely divine. So if you are disconnecting from the spirit through atheism or something of that nature, how do we cultivate that as a civilization as we move more and more into where science is the be all and end all, and it's like the new God for people? How do we deal with that? And
that's basically why we're dealing with emotions right now. You know, we've been in the air of mind. We've been in the action of mind. We've been, in the building, industry. You notice that a lot of our industry has been about electronics. It's all about the mind.
Yeah.
Where we need to get back down into the body.
Yeah.
And the body is emotions. Like I have a belief that we have the mind, the heart mind, and the digestive mind. And a lot of us are having problems with our digestive system.
I was about to say, that's where,
Yeah, my digestive mind is shot.
Yeah, mine too.
So, one of my mantras is when I'm going through life problems, and I call these life shifts implosions. They implode on me to help me be my greater self. It's like these implosions.
Yeah.
But I also say I'm digesting my life. I'm digesting my life. I'm digesting my life. I'm digesting my life. And I do kind of like how food goes down the gut. I'm digesting my life. I'm digesting my life because sometimes my body. I always kind of pictured this, that if you picture like a semi truck and the trailer. Yeah. That the spirit and the mind are the cab of the truck, right?
Right.
And they're like, okay, we're gonna go do this, this, and this, and this, and then they look back and they forgot to take the trailer, right?
Yes.
So they have to go back and get the trailer, and the trailer is actually the body, and so they have to clunk into the body, and then the body says, "Oh, we're doing this now.
Yeah, they hitch up.
I didn't know we were gonna do this.
Yeah.
Oh crap! Now I have to think about doing all this stuff."
Yeah.
Now, if we do it as a teamwork, all three of them, and we go places, people always wonder, how are you not afraid of getting Lou Gehrig's disease or colon cancer? Because my dad died of colon cancer.
Oh, really? Okay.
My mom died and my uncle died of Lou Gehrig's. I just say that I know my body. I work with my body. I understand when my liver is starting to say, you ate the wrong thing.
Yeah.
My body tells me because I include it.
So it's more about awareness again. It's like everything comes back to awareness, and the deficiency seems to be not paying attention.
Exactly.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Exactly. And that's why we're getting back into those emotions. That's why we're being triggered with our emotions, to get us back into knowing that our knee hurts because, we're not dealing with the emotion of it.
Yeah.
About moving forward, because our body represents different parts of us. Well, kind of like you were talking about your wife having a cough.
Yeah, you're a hot mess. What are you going to do? You got to start writing out something, or
get hit by a truck didn't help.
Yeah, that didn't help.
So when we're talking about the lungs, it's about breathing life. It's about coming in. Now we can have, like for me, I dealt with coughs all my life. So if I get a cough, it lingers with me too.
Oh, really?
But I also know that it's about speaking a truth. Am I speaking my truth too much? Or am I using discernment good? Am I speaking too much, or am I not speaking enough? Sore throats are about truth. It's about talking, about speaking. Our lungs is about breathing our life in, about breathing our life out. Am I being able to speak and be with my life?
So you see the archetypal connection in how it allegorically connects to us in that way. And I see that makes sense, because again, getting back to what we said at the beginning of this conversation, I feel that there's spirit, that everything has a spirit, and particularly with the body, neurons are all throughout us, not just in the brain. So it does stand to reason that every part of us has some rudimentary awareness, that if we can tap into that awareness, we can communicate with that. And it almost has a type of sentience, in the sense that we could communicate health to the parts of our body that are sick. Would you say that that's fair would you agree that that's possible?
Well, we have a part of our DNA that people don't, or that science doesn't know what it is. Mm-hmm. That's that part that I tap into. That's the healing, because that's the divine. Yeah. That's the part of divine that we came from in our DNA. And if you check in with that, that's the all healer.
You think that's that 2% that makes us different from chimpanzees?
Exactly.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, look, I've said it before on this show. When I was in the hospital, they were expecting me to be in the hospital up to 6 months. Yeah. But I would meditate. I bring this back to my martial arts background, meditation and all that. I'm laying there in the bed at night, external fixators, machines all hooked up to me.
Well, they're saying you're not even going to walk again.
They said I may never walk again, but that wasn't on my agenda.
You weren't going to allow that to happen.
No, we ain't doing that shit.
Yeah.
So I started to meditate, and I pictured the injuries in my body, and I pictured myself healing them.
Yeah.
And I was out of the hospital. Now, granted, I had a lot of prayer warriors and damn good doctors and nurses and friends that were there for me that I will never be able to repay.
Yeah.
But there's something to be said about deep prayer meditation of healing. I was out of the hospital and back home in 2.5 months.
Yeah,
and even the doctors are like, we don't know how to explain this.
Yeah.
They all, oh, it's just your grit, you're stubborn. Well, yeah, that's part of it, but there was something deeper going on.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
definitely.
So I definitely agree with that.
What's our next question?
Go ahead, ma'am.
Oh, I was just going to say, I can tell you something. I don't know if you want it on air, but I can see some of the disharmony that is in you. Now, some of the healing that I do is our DNA, going back in our DNA from mother to father, child, going back in DNA to heal that. I also go in past lives and deal with some healing. And I can do that at the same time and bring forth so that the body heals. And I can see some disharmony in you because of I'm going to make this as clean as I can being on air live. And I honor your in being, personal. That there's some disharmony in some of the things that happened, and it sits in your body in an ill way.
Oh yeah, my acupuncturist told me the same. Yeah,
okay.
I feel you. We'll talk about it later. But
yeah,
I think I know.
Because there's, but I can see.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah. I go back and forth.
Yeah, I get it.
Right.
We have to, and that's that part of that I said when I was grateful that my mind was willing to go along for this ride.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times our mind is not wanting to move forward.
Right. Yep. I appreciate that. So, Not Sure I don't know if it's really a question or a statement. He says, during meditation, good segue, I have something that refers to itself as abandon. This is usually during praying for the dead. Brought this up in past podcasts, but what's his deal, and how do I deal with this?
It's what
So
now? What does he call it again?
Abandon. So, being a student of yours, I would say that abandon would be. Now, Not Sure. I'm not trying to get into too much of your business, but we all know you being in the chat several times. You are an Iraq veteran. You've seen some horrible things over there, and part of the things that you deal with the guilt of us abandoning the Iraqis over there, if I'm not mistaken. So I think
he's feeling a sense of abandon?
I think abandon is probably the name for what you're feeling with the guilt. He says, during meditation, I have something that refers to itself as abandon. It's naming itself.
It names itself that.
It's usually during prayers for the dead.
So Natasha,
I get that.
Okay.
I get that.
Yes, ma'am.
I do get that. There's a lot of times when I have a private session with someone, there's an energy that sits in front of them. And it could be fear, it could be ego, it could even be the emotion of
yeah,
right.
And it sits in front of them because sometimes emotions don't have words or beings don't have words. And I ask that being to step aside so it can be a witness of what work we're going to do now. So what I'm getting from this person, and I can read people that I don't know, but what it is that until I get their permission, I don't necessarily go in deep because I also respect privacy.
Sure. Yes.
But what I can do is I can talk about the energy that I get over that dealing with this grief process that he has and dealing with this moment, that go in and befriend this abandonment and see what's behind. Take off the cloak of it. Take off find out who have a conversation with this being, I'm going to call it, this emotion, this energy that has created itself because of your life. If you can go in and have a conversation in meditation with them and take the cloak off, take that moment off and see how much they are your friend. They are your helper. They are a guide who is helping you through this emotional process that you're going through. To make it simply in a short time, it's a longer conversation.
Sure.
If I was to have a private session with them, it would be a longer conversation about how to do that and how to do that safely and that kind of stuff. But saying that he does meditate, he does have that understanding.
Yes.
And so if he can, like for me, I treat my, like if I'm angry, I'll put my arm around anger and talk to it like a friend. So with me, to me, energies, emotions are a part of me. So how can I decloak it to find out that anger is actually sadness or something unneeded or unwanted or dishonored? So how can I help honor it? How can I work with it and being in that moment? So there's that working through it. But I would say that there's something that it's almost like there's an edge that's he's going to find out soon that's actually a helper who's helping him deal with a lot of these. How did that happen? It's against the laws. It's against the laws of nature. It's against humanity.
So if he goes to, not sure, Jamie accidentally moderated you. She was, I think, she wasn't meaning to.
I double-clicked my mouse. I don't know what happened.
She's got the thumbs. She's all thumbs with her thumbs.
It's the thumbs.
But if not sure goes to your website, would he be able to communicate with you? Do you offer services there?
Yes, I do. I do honor. I have individual sessions with people. I love to do group sessions with people, group mediumships. I can do them online too. I do appreciate being able to support people, and I do understand. I do not hold judgment. Mm-hmm. If I didn't do it in this lifetime, I've done it in other lifetimes. Why should I judge?
We're all guilty eventually, right?
Yep.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So with that I do hold space for this with understanding and can very much help. I have a lot on my YouTube channel, I do have a lot of videos that can be short support systems. We actually, Regan and I just talked about faith on our show on Monday. Uh-huh. It's about having faith in life as we're going through what's happening.
Let's talk about your show real quick. We're coming at the end of this one, but maybe a lot of our audience would be interested in your podcast. So what is it called? How do they find it?
You can go to Natasha Venter or Natasha Venter Angelic Clarifications, and I'm on social media everywhere. Facebook, TikTok. I just got on TikTok. I know.
I feel the same way.
I'm trying it, but I'm not really.
I feel the same way, but it is where it's at.
The greater good.
It is what it is.
The greater good.
Yeah.
And so on Instagram, on YouTube, and I do a lot of short videos. I do shows Monday and Wednesdays at 4:00 Pacific time.
Okay.
On Facebook and on my YouTube channel to support life and people knowing that there's love out there. And, if we have that perception of love, we'll find more love.
Definitely.
I like that. Yeah. That's true. I would love to have you talk about love. I'd love to have you back on to maybe do a show on animal communication.
That's my wheelhouse.
Also maybe feng shui. We don't really know anybody that could talk professionally about feng shui, and I think that would be a fantastic topic.
This bookshelf represents, this is my relationship corner. So I have a relationship with my husband. I have a relationship with angels. I have a relationship with the team. It has animals and stuff. Yeah. I have a relationship with the fae. And then my family books are on the very bottom. So I have a relationship with all of them.
With all of it.
So that's kind of, this is my helpful people corner.
I love it.
Yeah, if you go to my house, you'll see a little bit of everything. I've got my animal totems, which mostly the wolf is my totem, and then I have things for the fae, things for the old gods. I've got a whole bunch of different displays for everybody. Everybody's represented at my house. So that's pretty cool.
It's like this wall behind us right here.
Like the wall behind us, yeah.
We've got everything back here.
I agree. That's where and that's the thing is that I have a basis of all religions, but I study one, which is love of divine.
Yes.
I study the love of God. I have a knowing of when I was taken from the greater love, where my soul began. I have that knowing. Mm-hmm. And so I know the love that I was brought from to be me.
Yes.
And so how can I else but help people know that?
Well, you're doing it right now. And I think it's going to be, that's the story of your life. And we will continue it on. We'll help facilitate it with
We're going
you.
to drain your brain, Natasha, and we appreciate it.
Oh, I love it. I finally have a voice, and I'm so grateful.
Well,
we are too. Thank you so much.
We have very much enjoyed this. Thank you so much for joining us here. And we will be in touch to get you scheduled back for some other topics because there's just too much to cover in one episode.
Right.
Definitely.
Appreciate you.
Thank you,
Thank
Natasha.
you all
Thank
for
you,
being
ma'am.
here with us.
Thank you. And to all of you out there who have spent this evening with us and Natasha, thank you for joining and tuning in. And we appreciate each and every one of you. You're all special to us, and we do this for you. It's not like we're doing it for ourselves. We enjoy it, but we really do feel that this is knowledge that needs to be shared with the world, and that's why we do this show, and we hope that you get something out of it. Anyway, next week we're going to be talking about archetypes, okay? And I'm going to do readings with a special kind of deck. So you need to be prepared to call into the show because I want to read you, okay? It'll be a very interesting time. You'll learn something about yourself. That's next week, Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern, on this channel, on YouTube, and also on Spreaker, and of course on demand everywhere that podcasts are found. But until then, I'll see you out there in the ether.
Good night, everybody.
God bless.